scientist back into the here and now. Huh? Can you tell me how the Somras works, Brahaspati? Asked Shiva again. Of course, said Brahaspati, as his eyes refocused on the people in front of him. Noticing Nandi, he asked, Is it all right to speak in front of the captain? Nandi has been my friend through my time in Meluha, said Shiva. I hope it is all right if he stays here. Nandi felt touched that his lord still trusted him so openly. Nandi swore once again, on pain of death, to never lie to his lord. Whatever you say, Shiva, said Brahaspati, smiling warmly. Shiva noticed that Brahaspati was not submissive or excessively deferential on discovering that he was the Neelkanth. Just like Parvateshwar, Brahaspati called Shiva by his name and not my lord. However, Shiva felt that while Parvateshwar's attitude was driven by a distrusting surliness, Brahaspati's was driven perhaps by an assured affability. Thank you, smiled Shiva. So how does the Somras work? The royal procession moved slowly on the road to Mount Mandar. There was a pilot guard of 160 cavalrymen who rode before the 5 royal carriages in columns of 4 abreast. A rear guard of another 160 rode behind the royal carriages in a similar formation. A side guard of 40 each marched along the left and right flanks. Each carriage also had 10 soldiers and 5 serving maids seated on the side supports. The soldiers were the legendary Arishthanemi, the most feared militia in all of India. The 5 carriages were made of solid wood with no windows or apertures, except for upward-pointed slits at the top for ventilation. There was a grill in front behind the rider to allow in light and air, and this could be shut instantly in case of an attack. All the carriages were of exactly the same dimension and appearance, making it impossible to say which carriage carried the royal family. If a person had Divya Drishti, divine vision, to look beyond what human eyes could see, he would observe that the first, third, and fourth carriages were empty. The second carried the royal family, Daksha, his wife Virini, and his daughter Sati. The last carriage carried Parvateshwar and some of his key brigadiers. Father, I still don't understand why you insist on taking me along to pujas. I'm not even allowed to attend the main ceremony, said Sati. I have told you many times before, smiled Daksha, as he patted Sati's hand fondly. None of my pujas are complete and pure till I have seen your face. I don't care about the damned law. Father, whispered Sati with an embarrassed smile and a slight reproachful shake of her head. She knew it was wrong of her father to insult the law. Sati's mother, Virini, looked at Daksha with an awkward smile. Then, taking a quick look at Sati, returned to her book. At a short distance from the royal procession, hidden by the dense forest, a small band of 50 soldiers slunk along silently. The soldiers wore light leather armor on their torso and had their dhotis tied in military style to ensure ease of movement. Each of them bore 2 swords, a long knife, and had a hard shield made of metal and leather tied loosely around their back. Their shoes had grooves to hold 3 small knives. At the head were 2 men. One of them, a handsome young man with a battle scar embellishing his face, wore a dark brown turban which signified that he was the captain. His leather armor had been tied a little loose, and a gold chain and pendant had slipped out carelessly. The pendant had a beautiful white representation of a horizontal crescent moon, the Chandravanshi symbol. Next to him walked a giant of a man, covered in a long robe from head to toe. A hood stitched onto the robe was pulled up, while his face was covered with a black mask. Very little of him was visible, except for his strong, fleshy hands and his expressionless, almond-shaped eyes. He had a leather bracelet tied to his right wrist with a serpent Om symbol embroidered on it. Without turning to the captain, the hooded figure said, Vishvadyum, your mark is visible. Put it in and tighten your armor. An embarrassed Vishvadyum immediately pushed the chain inside and pulled the 2 strings on the side of his shoulder to tighten the breastplate. My lord, begging your pardon, said Vishvadyum, but perhaps we could move ahead to confirm that this is the route to Mount Mandar. Once we know that, we'll be sure that our informant was correct. I'm sure that we can come back to kidnap her later. We are dangerously outnumbered in any case. We can't do anything right now. The hooded figure replied calmly, Vishvadyum, have I ordered an attack? Where does the question of us being outnumbered come in? And we are going in the direction of Mount Mandar. A few hours' delay will not bring the heavens down. For now, we we follow." Vishwadyum swallowed hard. There was nothing he hated more than opposing his lord's view. After all, it was his lord who had found the rare Suryavanshis sympathetic to their cause. This breakthrough would make it possible for them to rip out and destroy the very heart of Meluha. He spoke softly. "But, my lord, you know the queen doesn't like delays. There is unrest brewing amongst the men that perhaps the focus is being lost." The hooded figure turned sharply. His body seemed to convey anger, but his voice was composed. "I am not losing focus. If you want to leave, please go. You will get your money. I will do this alone if I have to." Shocked to see this rare show of emotion on his leader, Vishwadyum retracted immediately. "No, my lord, that is not what I was trying to imply. I am sorry. I will stay with you till you release me. You are right. A few hours will make no difference when we have waited for centuries." The platoon continued tracking the royal caravan silently. "At a conceptual level, how the Somras works is ridiculously simple," said Brahaspati. "The almost impossible task was to convert the concept into reality. That was the genius of Lord Brahma. Jai Shri Brahma!" "Jai Shri Brahma!" repeated Shiva, Kanakla, and Nandi. Before understanding how the medicine slows down the aging process dramatically, we have to understand what keeps us alive, said Brahaspati. There is a fundamental thing that none of us can live without. Shiva stared at Brahaspati, waiting for him to expound. "And that fundamental thing is energy," explained Brahaspati. "When we walk, talk, think, that is when we do anything that can be called being alive. We use energy." "We have a similar concept amongst our people," said Shiva, "except we call it Shakti." "Shakti?" asked a surprised Brahaspati. "Interesting. That word has not been used to describe energy for many centuries. It was a term of the Pandyas, the ancestors of all the people of India. Do you know where your tribe came from, their lineage?" "I'm not really sure, but there is an old woman in my tribe who claims to know everything about our history. Perhaps we should ask her when she comes to Devagiri." "Perhaps we should," smiled Brahaspati. "In any case, getting back to the subject, we know nothing can be done by our body without energy. Now, where does this energy come from?" "From the food that we eat?" suggested Nandi timidly. He was finally getting the confidence to speak in front of such important people. "Absolutely right. The food that we eat stores energy, which we can expend. That's also why if we don't eat, we feel weak. However, you don't get energy just by eating food. Something inside the body has to draw the energy so that we can put it to good use." "Absolutely," agreed Shiva. "The conversion of food into energy is done by the air we breathe," continued Brahaspati. "The air has various gases in it. One of these gases is called oxygen, which reacts with our food and releases energy. If we don't get oxygen, our body would be starved of energy and we would die." "But this is the process that keeps us alive," said Shiva. "What does the medicine have to do with it? The medicine has to work on that which causes us to grow old, become weaker and die." Brahaspati smiled. "What I told you does have something to do with how we age, because as it appears, nature has a sense of humor. The very thing that keeps us alive is also what causes us to age and eventually die. When oxygen reacts with our food to release energy, it also releases free radicals called oxidants. These oxidants are toxic as well. When you leave any fruit out and it goes bad, it's because it has been oxidized, or the oxidants have reacted with it to make it rot. A similar oxidizing process causes metals to corrode. It happens especially with the new metal we've discovered, iron. The same thing happens to our body when we breathe in oxygen. The oxygen helps convert the food we eat into energy, but it also causes the release of oxidants into our body, which start reacting inside us. We rust from the inside out, and hence age and die." "By the holy god Agni!" exclaimed Nandi. "The very thing that gives us life also slowly kills us?" "Yes," said Brahaspati. "Think about it. The body tries to store everything that you need from the outside world to survive. It stores enough food so that even if you don't eat for a few days, you won't die. It stocks up on water so that a few days of thirst will not kill you. It seems logical, right? If your body needs something, it keeps some of it as a backup for possible shortages." "Absolutely," agreed Shiva. "On the other hand, the body does not store enough oxygen, the most crucial component of staying alive, to last for more than just a few minutes. It doesn't make sense at all. The only explanation can be that the body realizes that despite being an elixir, oxygen is also a poison. Hence, it is dangerous to store. So, what did Lord Brahma do? Asked Shiva. After a lot of research, Lord Brahma invented the somras, which, when consumed, reacts with the oxidants, absorbs them, and then expels them from the body as sweat or urine. Because of the somras, there are no oxidants left in the body. Is that why the sweat released from the body is poisonous the first time after a person drinks the somras? Yes, your sweat is particularly dangerous the first time after you drink the somras. Having said that, remember, sweat and urine released from the body, even after a person has drunk the somras for years, remains toxic. So, you have to eject it from the body and make sure that it does not affect anyone else. So, that's why the Meluhans are so obsessed with hygiene. Yes, that's why all Meluhans are taught about two things from a young age, water and hygiene. Water is the cleanest absorber of the effluents that the somras generates and excretes as toxins. Meluhans are taught to drink gallons of water, and everything that can be washed should be washed. The Meluhans bathe at least twice a day. All ablutions are done in specific rooms, and the waste is carried out by underground drains safely out of the city. Strict hygiene standards, smiled Shiva as he remembered his first day in Kashmir and Ayurvedi's strong words. What goes into manufacturing the somras? Manufacturing the somras is not without its fair share of difficulties. It requires various ingredients that are not easily available. For example, the Sanjeevani tree. The empire has giant plantations to produce these trees. The manufacturing procedure also generates a lot of heat, so we have to use a lot of water during the processing to keep the mixture stable. Also, the crushed branches of the Sanjeevani tree have to be churned with the waters of the Saraswati river before processing begins. Water from other sources doesn't work. Is that strange noise I keep hearing the churners? That's exactly what it is. We have giant churning machines in a massive cavern at the base of this mountain. The Saraswati waters are led in here through a complex system of canals. The water is collected in an enormous pool in the cavern, which we affectionately call Sagar. Sagar? An ocean? You call a pool of water by that name? Asked a surprised Shiva, for he had heard legends about the massive, never-ending expanse of water called Sagar. It is a bit of hyperbole, admitted Brahaspati with a smile. But if you did see the size of the pool, you would realize that we are not that off the mark. Well, I would certainly like to see the entire facility. It was too late when we came in last night, so I haven't seen much of the mountain as yet. I will take you round after lunch, said Brahaspati. Shiva grinned in reply. He was about to say something, but checked himself in time, looking at both Kanakla and Nandi. Brahaspati noticed the hesitation. He felt Shiva might want to ask him something, but not in front of Nandi and Kanakla. Brahaspati turned to them and said, I think Shiva wants to ask me something. May I request you to wait outside? It was a measure of the respect that Brahaspati commanded that Kanakla immediately rose to leave the room after a formal namaste, followed by Nandi. Brahaspati turned to Shiva with a smile. Why don't you ask me the real question you came to ask? Chapter 9. Love and its Consequences. I didn't want to question you in front of them. Their faith is overwhelming, explained Shiva with a wry grin. He was beginning to like Brahaspati. He enjoyed being around a man who treated him like an equal. Brahaspati nodded. I understand, my friend. What do you want to ask? Why me? Asked Shiva. Why did the somras have this strange effect on me? I might have a blue throat, but I don't know how I'm going to become the savior of the Suryavanshis. The Emperor tells me that I'm supposed to be the one who will complete Lord Ram's unfinished work and destroy the Chandravanshis. He told you that? Asked Brahaspati, his eyes wide in surprise. The Emperor can be a little tiresome at times. But suffice it to say that what he told you is not completely correct. The legend doesn't exactly say that the Neelkanth will save the Suryavanshis. The legend says two things. First, that the Neelkanth will not be from the Sapt Sindhu, and second, that the Neelkanth will be the destroyer of evil. The Meluhans believe that this implies that the Neelkanth will destroy the Chandravanshis, since they are obviously evil. But destroying the Chandravanshis doesn't mean that the Suryavanshis will be saved. There are many other problems besides the Chandravanshis that we need to solve. What kind of problems? Like the Nagas? Brihaspati seemed to hesitate for a moment. He replied carefully, There are many problems. We are working hard to solve them. But coming back to your question, why did the Somras have this effect on you? Yes, why did it? Why did my throat turn blue? Forget about stopping the degeneration of my body. The Somras actually repaired a dislocated shoulder and a frostbitten toe. It repaired an injury? Asked incredulous Brihaspati. That's impossible. It's just supposed to prevent diseases and aging, not repair injuries. Well, it did in my case. Brihaspati thought for a bit. We will have to do experiments to come up with a definitive answer. For now, though, I can think of only one explanation. From what I know, you come from the highlands beyond the Himalayas, right? Shiva nodded. The air gets thinner as you go higher up the mountains, continued Brihaspati. There is less oxygen in thinner air. That means your body was used to surviving with less oxygen and resultantly was less harmed by the oxidants. Therefore, the antioxidants in the Somras may have had a stronger effect on you. That could be one of the reasons, agreed Shiva. But if that was the case, the rest of my tribe should also have turned cold and blue. Why just me? A good point, conceded Brihaspati. But tell me one thing. Did your tribe also experience an improvement in their pre-existing conditions? Actually, yes, they did. So maybe the diluted air you all lived in did have some role to play. But since all of your tribe did not develop blue throats, it is obvious that the thinner air theory may be a partial explanation. We can always research it more. I'm sure there is a scientific explanation for the blue throat. Shiva looked at Brihaspati intently as he read between the lines of Brihaspati's last statement. You don't believe in the legend of the Neelkanth, do you? Brihaspati smiled at Shiva awkwardly. He was beginning to like Shiva and did not want to say anything to insult him. But he wasn't going to lie either. I believe in science. It provides a solution and a rationale for everything. And if there is anything that appears like a miracle, the only explanation is that a scientific reason for it has not been discovered as yet. Then why do the people of Meluha not look to science for solving their problems? I'm not sure, said Brihaspati thoughtfully. Perhaps it is because science is a capable but cold-hearted master. Unlike a Neelkanth, it will not solve your problems for you. It will only provide you the tools that you may need to fight your own battles. Perhaps it is easier for people to believe that someone else will come and solve their problems rather than solve it themselves. So what do you think is the role that the Neelkanth has to play in Meluha? Brihaspati looked at Shiva sympathetically. I would like to think that true Suryavanshis should fight their own demons rather than put pressure on someone else and expect him to solve their problems. A true Suryavanshi's duty is to push himself to the limit of his abilities and strength. The coming of the Neelkanth should only redouble a Suryavanshi's efforts, since it is obvious that the time for the destruction of evil is near. Shiva nodded. Are you concerned that it may be too much of a strain for you to take up a responsibility that you don't really want because of the pressure of faith? Asked Brihaspati. No, that is not my concern, replied Shiva. This is a wonderful country and I will certainly want to do all I can to help. But what if your people depend on me to protect them, and I can't? Right now, I can't say that I can do all that is expected from me. So how can I give my word? Brihaspati smiled. According to his rule book, any man who took his own word seriously was worth respecting. You appear to be a good man, Shiva. You will probably face a lot of pressure in the coming days. Be careful, my friend. Because of the blue throat and the blind faith it generates, your decisions will have ramifications for the entire land. Remember, whether a man is a legend or not is decided by history, not fortune-tellers. Shiva smiled, glad to have finally found a man who understood his predicament, and more importantly, was willing to at least offer some advice. It was late in the evening. Having spent a thoroughly enjoyable afternoon on a detailed tour of Mount Mandar with Brihaspati, Shiva lay on his bed reading a book. A spent chillum lay on the side table. A few aspects of the story he was reading, the righteous war against the Asuras, troubled him. The Asuras were demons and were expected to behave like demons, having a pathological hatred for the Devas. They routinely attacked Deva cities, trying to force them to accept the Asura way of life. This was not a surprise to Shiva. What was unexpected, though, was the way some of the Devas behaved, going to unusually unethical limits in their blind pursuit of victory. Lord Rudra, though personally a great man, seemed to ignore the indiscretions of the Devas in the interest of the larger good. Shiva heard a commotion outside the guest house. He looked out of his first-floor balcony to notice that the royal caravan had just arrived. The Arishthanemi soldiers had formed a neat salutary row at the entrance. Some people appeared to be disembarking from the far side of the second carriage. Shiva assumed it must be the royal family. The surprise was that the Arishthanemi seemed to be going through just the normal motions in receiving the royal family. There wasn't the usual servitude that would be expected in front of royalty. Shiva suspected that this could be due to the usual Meluhan obsession with perceived equality. However, Shiva's equality theory was challenged when he looked at the fifth carriage, from which Parvateshwar alit. Here, the Arishthanemi seemed to be in a tizzy. The senior captain rushed in front of Parvateshwar and executed a Meluhan military salute, a quick click of the heels, the body rigid in attention, and the right hand, balled in a fist, brought rapidly and violently to his left chest. After this salute, the captain bent low in respect to the chief of the army. The soldiers at the back repeated their captain's greeting. Parvateshwar formally saluted in return, accompanied with a slight bow of his head. He started towards his soldiers, inspecting them, while the captain politely fell 2 steps behind. Shiva had a feeling that the admiration reserved for Parvateshwar was not because of the post he held. It was for the man himself. For all his surliness, Parvateshwar had a reputation of a brave warrior, a soldier's general, respected as a man whose word was true. Shiva could see the strength of that repute in the eyes of each Arishthanemi, who bent low on receiving the attention of his general. A little while later, Shiva heard a soft knock on his door. He did not need to open it to know who was on the other side. Sighing softly, he opened the door. Daksha's fixed smile disappeared when he started a little as the unfamiliar odor of the marijuana assaulted his senses. Kanachla, standing to the emperor's right, appeared equally perplexed. "What is that stench?" Daksha asked Brihaspati, who stood to the left. "Perhaps you should change the lord's room. How can you subject him to this discomfort?" "I have a feeling that Shiva is comfortable with this aroma, Your Highness," said Brihaspati. "It is a smell that travels with me, Your Highness," said Shiva. "I like it." Daksha was baffled. His face did nothing to hide his revulsion, but he quickly recovered his composure. After all, the lord was happy with the malodor. "I'm sorry to disturb you, my lord," said Daksha, his smile back in place. "I just thought I would inform you that my family and I have reached the guest house." "It is very kind of you to inform me, Your Highness," said Shiva with a formal namaste. "My family and I were hoping to have the honor of eating breakfast with you tomorrow morning, my lord." "The honor would be mine, Your Highness." "Excellent, excellent," beamed Daksha as he moved on to the question that dominated his mind. "So, what do you think of the somras, my lord? Isn't it really the drink of the gods?" "Yes, Your Highness, it does appear to be a miraculous drink." "It is the basis of our civilization," continued Daksha. "Once you have taken a tour of our land, you will see the goodness of our way of life. I am sure you will find it in your heart to do something to save it." "Your Highness, I already think highly of your country. It truly is great and treats its citizens well. I wouldn't doubt that it is a way of life that is worth protecting. However, what I am not sure about is what I can do. Yours is such an advanced civilization, and I am just a simple tribal man." "Faith is a very potent weapon, my lord," said Daksha, his hands joined in supplication. "All that is needed is for you to have as much faith in yourself as we have in you. I am sure that if you spend a few more days in our country and see the effect that your presence has on our people, you will realize what you can do." Shiva gave up arguing against Daksha's childlike belief. Brihaspati winked at Shiva before coming to his rescue. "Your Highness, Shiva looks tired to me. It has been a long day. Maybe he should retire, and we could meet tomorrow." Daksha smiled. "Perhaps you're right, Brihaspati. My apologies for troubling you, my lord. We will see you at breakfast. Have a good night." "Good night," wished Shiva in return. Sati waited quietly at the table as Daksha glanced nervously at the prahar lamp. To the left were Kanachla, Brihaspati, and Parvateshwar. To his right was an empty chair. "For the Neelkanth," thought Sati. Next to the empty chair sat Sati, and to her right was her mother, Veerini. Daksha had agonized deeply over the seating to get it exactly right. Sati looked over the arrangements, a formal table and chairs for breakfast, rather than the preferred low table and floor cushions that Meluhans normally sat upon to eat. The beloved banana leaf had been replaced by gold plates. The taste-enhancing kulhars, or mud cups, had been replaced by refined silver glasses. She thought that her father was really pulling out all stops for this breakfast meeting. She had seen him pin his hopes on too many so-called Neelkanths earlier, miracle men who had turned out to be frauds. She hoped that her father would not have to face disillusionment again. The crier announced Shiva and Nandi. As Daksha rose with a reverential namaste to receive the Lord, Parvateshwar rolled his eyes at the servile behavior of his emperor. At the same instant, Sati bent down to pick up a glass that she had accidentally knocked over to the floor. "My lord," said Daksha, pointing to the people standing around the table, "Kanakla, Brahaspati and Parvateshwar, you already know. At the far right is my wife, Queen Virini." Shiva smiled politely as he returned Virini's namaste with a formal namaste and a low bow. "And next to her," said Daksha with a broad smile as Sati came up holding the glass she had retrieved, "is my daughter, Princess Sati." The breath went out of Shiva as he looked at his life staring back at him. His heart beat a frantic rhythm. He could swear that he had a whiff of his favorite fragrance in the world, the aroma of the holy lake at sunset. As before, he was mesmerized. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room, except for the noise made by the unfortunate glass which fell from Sati's hand again. The clang of the rolling glass distracted Sati slightly from her fixed gaze. With superhuman effort, she managed to control the look of shock on her face. She was breathing heavily, as if she had just danced a duet with Shiva. What she did not know was that her soul was doing exactly that. Daksha gazed at the dumbstruck couple with glee. He had the look of a director who had just seen his play being perfectly executed. Nandi, standing right behind Shiva, could see Sati's expression. Suddenly, everything became clear to him. The dance practices, the Vikarma touch, the Shuddhikaran, and his lord's anguish. While some part of him was afraid, another reconciled to it quickly. If his lord wanted this, he would support it in every way possible. Brahaspati stared blankly at the couple, deep in thought about the implications of this unexpected situation. Parvateshwar looked at the goings-on with barely concealed repugnance. What was happening was wrong, immoral, and worst of all, illegal. "My lord," said Daksha, pointing to the empty seat at his right, "please take your seat, and we shall begin." Shiva did not react. He had not heard Daksha's words. He was in a world where the only sound was the harmonious melody of Sati's heavy breathing, a tune he could blissfully dance to for his next 7 lives. "My lord," repeated Daksha, a little louder. A distracted Shiva finally looked at Daksha as if from another world. "Please take your seat, my lord," said Daksha. "Yes, of course, your highness," said Shiva, averting his eyes in embarrassment. As Shiva sat down, the food was brought in. It was a simple delicacy that the Meluhans loved for breakfast: rice and some cereals fermented and ground into a thick batter. Small portions of this batter were then wrapped in banana leaves and steamed into cylindrical roundels. The preparation was served while still draped in the banana leaf, along with some spicy lentils for taste. The dish was called an idli. "You're the Neelkanth?" a still shocked Sati whispered softly to Shiva, as she had willed some calmness into her breathing. "Apparently so," replied Shiva with a playful grin. "Impressed?" Sati answered that question with a raised, disdainful brow. The mask was back. "Why would I be impressed?" "What?" "My lord," said Daksha. "Yes, your highness," said Shiva, turning towards Daksha. "I was thinking," said Daksha, "our puja should be over by this evening. Yet I have to stay here for 2 more days for some reviews with Brahaspati. There is no point in having Virini and Sati get thoroughly bored out here for so much time." "Thank you, your highness," said Brahaspati with a sly grin. "Your vote of confidence in the interest that the royal family has in Mount Mandar is most reassuring." The entire table burst out laughing. So did Daksha, exhibiting a sporting spirit. "You know what I mean, Brahaspati," said Daksha, shaking his head. Turning back to Shiva, he continued, "From what I know, my lord, you were planning to leave for Devagiri tomorrow morning. I think it may be a good idea for Virini and Sati to accompany you. The rest of us can catch up with you 2 days later." Sati looked up in alarm. She wasn't sure why, but something told her that she shouldn't agree to this plan. Another part of her said that she had no reason to be scared. In all the 85 years she has spent as a Vikarma, she had never broken the law. She had the self-control to know what was right and what wasn't. Shiva, though, had no such thoughts. With very obvious delight, he said, "I think it's a very good idea, your highness. Nandi and I could travel with both her highnesses back to Devagiri." "It's settled then," said a visibly content Daksha. Turning to Parvateshwar, he said, "Parvateshwar, please ensure that the Arishthanemi escort are broken into 2 groups for the return journey." My lord, I don't think that's wise, said Parvateshwar. A large part of the Arishthanemi are still in Devagiri, preparing for the material transfer. Also, the standing contingent in Mount Mandar cannot be reduced under any circumstances. We may not have enough soldiers for 2 caravans. Perhaps we could all travel together day after tomorrow. I'm sure there won't be a problem, said Daksha. And don't you always say that each Arishthanemi is equal to 50 enemy soldiers? It's settled. The Lord Neelkanth, Virani, and Sati will leave tomorrow morning. Please make all the arrangements. Parvateshwar went unhappily back to his thoughts as Shiva and Sati started whispering to each other again. You did go for a Shuddhikaran, didn't you? Asked Sati seriously. Yes, said Shiva. He wasn't lying. He had gone for a purification ceremony on his last night at Devagiri. He didn't believe he needed it. However, he knew that Sati would ask him the next time they met, and he didn't want to lie to her. Though I think the concept of doing a Shuddhikaran is completely absurd, whispered Shiva. In fact, the entire concept of the Vikarma is ridiculous. I think this is one of the few things in Meluha that is not fair and should be changed. Sati looked up suddenly at Shiva, her face devoid of any expression. Shiva stared hard into her eyes, trying to gauge some of the thoughts running through her mind, but he hit a blank wall. It was the beginning of the second prahar the next day when Shiva, Virani, Sati and Nandi departed for Devagiri along with 100 Arishthanemi. Daksha, Parvateshwar and Kanakla stood outside the guest house to see them off. Brahaspati had been detained by some scheduled experiments. The entourage had to sit in the same carriage as there were guidelines that a minimum of 4 carriages had to be kept aside for any caravan that carried the emperor. Since the royal procession had come in 5 carriages, that left only 1 carriage for this caravan. Parvateshwar was deeply unhappy about the unorthodox way in which members of the royal family had to travel without any dummy carriages, but his objections were overruled by Daksha. Sitting on one of the comfortable sofas inside the carriage, Sati noticed that Shiva was wearing his cravat again. Why do you cover your throat all the time? I'm uncomfortable with the attention that comes when anyone sees the blue throat, replied Shiva. But you will have to get used to it. The blue throat is not going to disappear. True, answered Shiva with a smile, but till I get used to it, the cravat is my shield. As the caravan left, Parvateshwar and Kanakla came up to Daksha. Why do you have so much faith in that man, my lord? Asked Parvateshwar of Daksha. He has done nothing to deserve respect. How can he lead us to victory when he has not even been trained for it? The entire concept of the Neelkanth goes against our rules. In Meluha, a person is supposed to be given a task only if he is found capable of it and trained by the system. We are in a state of war, Parvateshwar, replied Daksha. An undeclared one, but a state of war all the same. We face a terrorist attack every other week. These cowardly Chandravanshis don't even attack from the front so that we can fight them. And our army is too small to attack their territory openly. Our rules are not working. We need a miracle. And the first rule of serendipity is that miracles come when we forget rational laws and have faith. I have faith in the Neelkanth, and so do my people. But Shiva has no faith in himself. How can you force him to be our savior when he himself doesn't want to do it? Sati will change that. My lord, you're going to use your own daughter as bait? Asked a horrified Parvateshwar. And do you really want a savior who decides to help us just because of his lust? It is not lust! Parvateshwar and Kanakla kept quiet, shocked by Daksha's reaction. What kind of a father do you think I am? Asked Daksha. You think I will use my daughter so? She just may find comfort and happiness with the Lord. She has suffered enough already. I want her to be happy, and if in doing so I help my country as well, what is the harm? Parvateshwar was about to say something, but thought the better of it. We need to destroy the Chandravanshi ideology, continued Daksha. And the only way we can do that is if we can give the benefits of our lifestyle to the people of Swadweep. The common Swadweepans will be grateful for this, but their Chandravanshi rulers will try everything in their power to stop us. They may be able to resist us, but try as they might, they cannot stop a people led by the Neelkanth. And if Sati is with the Neelkanth, there is no way he would refuse to lead us against the Chandravanshis. But, Your Highness, do you really think the Lord will come to our side just because he is in love with your daughter? Asked Kanakla. You have missed the point. The Lord does not need to be convinced to be on our side, said Daksha. He already is. We are a great civilization, Maybe not perfect, but great all the same. One has to be blind to not see that. What the Neelkanth needs is the motivation and belief in himself to lead us. That belief in himself will assert itself when he moves closer to Sati." "And how is that going to happen, Your Highness?" asked Parvateshwar, frowning slightly. "You know what is the most powerful force in a man's life?" asked Daksha. Kanakla and Parvateshwar looked at Daksha nonplussed. "It is his intense desire to impress the person he loves most," expounded Daksha. "Look at me. I've always loved my father. My desire to impress him is what is driving me even today. Even after his death, I still want to make him proud of me. It is driving me to my destiny as the king who will re-establish the pure Suryavanshi way of life across India. And when the Neelkanth develops a deep desire to make Sati proud of him, he will rise to fulfill his destiny." Parvateshwar frowned, not quite agreeing with the logic, but kept quiet all the same. "But what if Sati seeks something different?" asked Kanakla. "Like a husband who spends all his time with her." "I know, my daughter," replied Daksha confidently. "I know what it takes to impress her." "That's an interesting point of view, my lord," smiled Kanakla. "Just out of curiosity, what do you think is the most powerful force in a woman's life?" Daksha laughed out loud. "Why do you ask? Don't you know?" "Well, the most powerful force in my life is the desire to get out of the house before my mother-in-law wakes up." Both Daksha and Kanakla guffawed loudly. Parvateshwar didn't seem to find it funny. "I'm sorry, but that is no way to speak about your mother-in-law." "Oh, relax, Parvateshwar," said Kanakla. "You take everything too seriously." "I think," said Daksha, smiling, "the most powerful force in a woman's life is the need to be appreciated, loved, and cherished for what she is." Kanakla smiled and nodded. Her emperor truly understood human emotions. Chapter 10. The Hooded Figure Returns. As the caravan emerged from the carefully chiseled passage leading out from the depths of Mount Mandar, Virani requested that the carriage be stopped for a minute. Virani, Sati, Shiva and Nandi went down on their knees and offered a short prayer to the mountain for its continued benefaction. Watching over them on high alert was the Arishtanemi Bhabravya, a strapping man of 60 years with an intimidating moustache and beard. After a short while, Bhabravya came up to Virani and said with barely concealed impatience, "Your Highness, perhaps it's time to get back into the carriage." Virani looked up at the captain and with a quick nod got up. Sati, Shiva and Nandi followed. "It's her," said Vishwadyum, putting down the scope and turning towards his lord. The platoon was at a safe distance, concealed from the caravan. The dense and impenetrable foliage was an effective shield. "Yes," said the hooded figure, and let his eyes linger on Shiva's muscular body. Even without using the scope, he was in no doubt that this was the same man who had fought him at the Brahma temple some weeks ago. "Who is that man?" "I don't know, my lord." "Keep your eye on him. He was the one who foiled the last attack." Vishwadyum wanted to say that the previous attempt failed because it was unplanned. The presence of the caste unmarked man had little role to play. Vishwadyum could not understand the recent irrational decisions of his lord. It was unlike him. Perhaps it was the closeness of the ultimate objective that was clouding his judgment. Vishwadyum was, however, wise enough to keep his thoughts to himself. "Perhaps we could track them for around an hour before we attack, my lord. It will be a safe distance from the Arishtanemi backup. We can get this over with quickly and report back to the Queen that the informer was correct." "No, we'll wait for a few hours more when they are at least a half-day's distance from Mount Mandar. Their new carriages have systems that can send an emergency signal immediately. We need to ensure our task is done before backup arrives." "Yes, my lord," said Vishwadyum, happy to see that his lord's famed tactical brilliance had not diminished. "And remember, I want it done quickly," added the hooded figure. "The more time we take, the more people get hurt." "Yes, my lord." It was the beginning of the third prahar when the caravan stopped at the halfway clearing for lunch. Here, the forest had been cut back to a distance that made a surprise attack impossible. The Queen's maids quickly unpacked the food and started heating it in the center of the clearing. The royal party and Shiva were sitting closer to the head of the caravan, in the direction towards Devagiri. Babravya stood on the higher ground in the rear, keeping an eagle eye on the surroundings. Apart from the royal party, half the Arishthanemi soldiers had also sat down to eat, while the others kept watch. Shiva was about to take a second helping of rice when he heard the crack of a twig down the road. Stopping midway, he listened intently for another sound. There was none. His instinct told him this was a predator who, realizing he had made a mistake, was now keeping still. Shiva looked over at Sati to see if she had heard the sound. She, too, was staring intently down the road. There was a soft crunch as the foot on the broken twig eased its pressure slightly. It would have been missed by most, except a focused listener. Shiva immediately put his plate down, pulled out his sword and fixed his shield on his back. Babravya saw Shiva across the caravan and drew his sword as well, giving quick, silent signals to his men to do the same. The Arishthanemi were battle-ready in a matter of seconds. Sati and Nandi too pulled out their swords and got into traditional fighter positions. Sati whispered to Virani without turning, "Mother, please sit in the carriage and lock it. Take the maids in too, but get them to disconnect the horses from the carriage first. We are not retreating, and we don't want the enemy kidnapping you either." "Come with me, Sati," pleaded Virani, as her maids rushed to pull out the holes on the carriage. "No, I'm staying here. Please hurry, we may not have much time." Virani rushed into the carriage, followed by the maids, who quickly locked it from the inside. At a distance, Babravya whispered to his aide, "I know their tactics. I have seen these cowards on the southern border. They will send an advanced suicide party, pretend to retreat, and draw us into a stronghold. I don't care about the losses. We will chase those bastards and destroy every single one of them. They have run into the Arishthanemi. They will pay for this mistake." Shiva, meanwhile, turned to Sati and whispered carefully, "I think they must be aiming for a high-profile target. Nothing would be more significant than the royal family. Do you think that you too should wait in the carriage?" Sati's eyes darted up at Shiva in surprise. A pained look crossed her face before being replaced by a defiant glare. "I am going to fight." What's wrong with her? What I said is completely logical. Make the main objective of the enemy difficult to get at, and they will lose the will to fight. Shiva pushed these thoughts out of his mind to focus on the road. The rest of the caravan strained every nerve to listen intently for any movement from the enemy. They were prepared for the ambush. It was the enemy's turn to make a move. Just as they thought that it may have been a false alarm, the sound of a conch shell reverberated from down the road, from the direction of Mount Mandar. Shiva turned around, but did not take a step. Whatever was making the noise was moving rapidly towards them. Shiva could not recognize the cacophonic sound. However, the Arishthanemi from the southern border knew exactly what it was. That was the sound of a Nagadvani conch. It was blown to announce the launch of a Naga attack. Though impatient to fight, Babravya did not forget the standard operating procedures. He ordered an aide who rushed to the carriage and pulled out a red box fixed at the bottom. Kicking it open, the aide pressed a button on the side. A tubular chimney-like structure extended straight up from the box for nearly 25 feet. The chimney ensured that the smoke signal was not lost in the dense forest and could be seen by the scouts at both Devagiri and Mount Mandar. The soldier picked a branch from the fire and pushed it into the last of the 4 slots on the right side of the box. Red smoke fumed out of the chimney, signifying the presence of the highest level of danger. Help was 6 hours away, 4 if the backup rode hard. Babravya did not intend the battle to last that long. He intended to kill each of the Nagas and the Chandravanshis long before that. Then the attack began from the side of the road leading to Mount Mandar. A small band of 10 Chandravanshi soldiers charged at the Arishthanemi. One soldier was holding the Naga conch shell and blowing hard. Another amongst them had covered his entire face and head with a cloth, except for small slits for his eyes. The Naga himself. Shiva did not move. He could see the battle raging at the far end of the caravan. There were only 10 Chandravanshis. The Arishthanemi did not need any support. He signaled to Sati and Nandi to stay where they were. Sati agreed, for she too expected this attack to be a ruse. The battle was short and fierce. The Chandravanshi soldiers fought viciously, but were outnumbered. As Babravya expected, they turned in no time and retreated fast. "After them!" yelled Babravya. "Kill them all!" The Arishthanemi dashed behind their captain in pursuit of the retreating Chandravanshis. Most of them did not hear Shiva cry out loud, "No! Stay here! Don't chase them!" By the time some of the Arishthanemi heard Shiva's order, A majority had already left, chasing the Chandravanshis. Shiva was left in the clearing with Sati, Nandi, and just 25 soldiers. Shiva turned back towards the side of the road leading to Devagiri, the direction from which the crack of the twig had come. He turned again to look at the remaining Arishtanemi. Pointing towards his back, he spoke with a voice that was both steady and calm. "This is where the actual attack will come from. Get into a tight formation in fours, facing that direction. Keep the princess in the middle. We will have to hold them back for about 5 or 10 minutes. The other Arishtanemi will return when they realize there are no Chandravanshis to fight in that direction." The Arishtanemi looked at Shiva and nodded. They were battle-hardened men. They liked nothing more than a clear-headed and calm leader who knew exactly what he was doing. They quickly got into the formation ordered by Shiva and waited. Then the real attack began. 40 Chandravanshi soldiers, led by a hooded figure, emerged from the trees, walking slowly towards the Suryavanshi caravan. The outnumbered Arishtanemi remained stationary, waiting for their enemy to come to them. "Surrender the princess to us, and we will leave," said the hooded figure. "We want no unnecessary bloodshed." "The same Joker from the Brahma temple? He's got a strange costume, but he fights well." "We don't want any bloodshed either," said Shiva. "Leave quietly, and we promise not to kill you." "You're the one who's looking at death in the face, barbarian," said the hooded figure, conveying anger through his posture rather than his voice, which remained eerily composed. Shiva noticed the brown-turbaned officer look impatiently at the hooded figure. He clearly wanted to attack fast and get this over with. Dissension in the ranks. "The only face I'm looking at is a stupid festival mask, and it's soon going to be shoved down your pathetic little throat. Also, tell that brainless lieutenant of yours that he shouldn't give battle plans away." The hooded figure remained calm, not turning to look at Vishwadyum. Damn, this man is good. "This is the last warning, barbarian," repeated the hooded figure. "Hand her over right now." Sati suddenly turned towards the carriage as she realized something, shouting, "Mother, the new emergency conch shell close to the front grille. Blow it now!" A loud plea for help emitted from the carriage. Babravya and his men had been summoned. The hooded figure cursed as he realized his advantage had been taken away. He had very little time to complete this operation. The other Suryavanshis would be back soon. "Charge!" The Arishtanemi stayed in position. "Steady," said Shiva. "Wait for them. All you have to do is buy time. Keep the princess safe. Our friends will be back soon." As the Chandravanshis came closer, Sati suddenly broke through the cordon and attacked the hooded figure. Sati's surprise attack slowed the charge of the Chandravanshis. The Arishtanemi had no choice. They charged at the Chandravanshis like vicious tigers. Shiva moved quickly to protect the right flank of Sati as an advancing Vishwadyum got dangerously close to her. Vishwadyum swung his sword to force Shiva out of his way. However, the speed of Shiva's advance left Vishwadyum unbalanced. Shiva easily parried the blow and pushed Vishwadyum back with his shield. Nandi, meanwhile, moved rapidly to the left of Sati to block the Chandravanshis trying to charge down that side. In the meantime, Sati was attacking the hooded figure with fierce blows. The hooded figure, however, seemed intent to defend himself and was not striking back. He wanted her alive and unharmed. Shiva cut Vishwadyum savagely across the shoulder that had been exposed when he was pushed back. Grimacing, Vishwadyum brought his shield up to fend off another attack from Shiva. With the same movement, Vishwadyum brought his sword arm up to thrust at Shiva's torso. Shiva quickly pulled his shield in to protect himself, but not quickly enough. Vishwadyum was able to slash Shiva's chest. Stepping back and jumping to his right, Shiva brought his sword swiftly down in a brutal jab. While Vishwadyum promptly brought his shield up to block the attack, Shiva's unorthodox move unsettled him. He staggered back, realizing that Shiva was an excellent swordsman. It was going to be a hard and long duel. Nandi had already brought down one Chandravanshi soldier who had broken a law of combat of never attacking below the waist and cut Nandi's thigh. Bleeding profusely, Nandi was ferociously battling another soldier who had attacked him from the left. The Chandravanshi brought his shield down hard on Nandi's injured leg, making him stagger and fall. The Chandravanshi thought he had his man. Raising his sword high with both his hands, he was about to bring it down to finish the job, but he suddenly arched forward as if a brutal force had pounded him from the back. As he fell, Nandi saw a knife bedded deep in the Chandravanshi's back. Looking up, he saw Shiva's left arm continue down in a smooth arc from the release of the dagger. With his right hand, Shiva brought his sword up to block a vicious cut from Vishwadyum. As Nandi stumbled back to his feet, Shiva reached behind to pull his shield in front again. The hooded figure knew they were taking too long. The other Arishthanemi would be back soon. He tried to go behind Sati to club her on the back of the head and knock her unconscious, but she was too quick. She moved swiftly to the left to face her enemy again. Taking a knife out of her Angvastram folds with her left hand, she slashed outwards to cut deep across the hooded figure's immense stomach. The knife sliced through the robe, but its effect was broken by the armor. And then, with a resounding roar, Pabravya and the other Arishthanemi rushed back to fight alongside their mates. Seeing themselves vastly outnumbered, the hooded figure had no choice. He ordered his soldiers to retreat. Shiva stopped Pabravya from chasing the Chandravanshis once again. "Let them go, brave Pabravya," said Shiva. "We will have other chances to get them. Right now, the primary objective is to protect the royal family." Pabravya looked at Shiva with admiration for the way this foreigner fought, not the blue throat of which he was unaware. He nodded politely. "It makes sense, foreigner." Pabravya quickly formed the Arishthanemi soldiers into a tight perimeter and pulled the wounded within. Dead bodies were not touched. At least 3 Arishthanemi lost their lives, while 9 Chandravanshi bodies lay in the clearing. The last one had taken his own life, since he was too wounded to escape. Better to meet one's maker rather than fall alive in enemy hands and reveal secrets. Pabravya ordered his soldiers to stay low and keep their shields in front for protection against any arrows. And they waited so till the rescue party arrived. "My God!" cried an anxious Daksha as he hugged Sati tight. The rescue party of 500 soldiers had reached by the 4th hour of the 2nd Prahar. Daksha, Brahaspati and Kanakla had accompanied the caravan, despite Parvateshwar's warnings of the risk. Releasing Sati from his grip, Daksha whispered as a small tear escaped his eyes, "You're not injured, are you?" "I'm all right, father," said Sati self-consciously. "Just a few cuts, nothing serious." "She fought very bravely," said Veerini, as she beamed with pride. "I think that is a mother's bias," said Sati, as her serious expression was restored. Turning towards Shiva, she continued, "It was Shiva who saved the day, father. He figured out the real plan of the Chandravanshis and rallied everyone at the crucial moment. It was because of him that we beat them back." "Oh, I think she's too generous," said Shiva. "She's impressed. Finally." "She isn't being generous at all, my lord," said a visibly grateful Daksha. "You have started your magic already. We have actually beaten back a terrorist attack. You don't know how significant this is for us." "But it wasn't a terrorist attack, your highness," said Shiva. "It was an attempt to kidnap the princess." "Kidnap?" asked Daksha. "That hooded man certainly wanted her alive and unharmed." "What hooded man?" cried Daksha, alarmed. "That was the Naga, your highness," said Shiva, surprised at Daksha's hysterical response. "I have seen that man fight. He is an excellent warrior. A little slow in his movements, but excellent all the same. But while fighting Sati, he was trying his best not to hurt her." The colour drained completely from Daksha's face. Veerini glared at her husband with a strange mixture of fear and anger. The expressions on their faces made Shiva feel uncomfortable, as if he was intruding on a private family moment. "Father?" asked a worried Sati. "Are you all right?" Hearing no response from Daksha, Shiva turned to Sati and said, "Perhaps it's best if you speak to your family alone. If you don't mind, I'll go and check if Nandi and the other soldiers are all right." Parvateshwar was walking around his men, checking on the injured and ensuring that they received medical help, with Babravya 2 steps behind. He came up to the Chandravanshi who had been killed by Shiva while protecting Nandi. He roared in horror, "This man has been stabbed in the back!" "Yes, my lord," said Babravya with his head bowed. "Who did this? Who broke the sacred rules of combat?" "I think it was the foreigner, my lord, but I heard that he was trying to protect Captain Nandi, who had been attacked by this Chandravanshi, and the Chandravanshi himself was not following the combat rules, having attacked Nandi below the waist." Parvateshwar turned with a withering look at Babravya, causing him to cower in fear. "Rules are rules," he growled. "They are meant to be followed, even if your enemy ignores them." "Yes, my lord." "Go make sure that the dead get proper cremations, including the Chandravanshis." "My lord?" asked a surprised Babravya. "But they are terrorists." "They may be terrorists," snarled Parvateshwar, "but we are Suryavanshis. We are the followers of Lord Ram. There are norms that we follow even towards our enemies. The Chandravanshis will get proper cremations. Is that clear?" "Yes, my lord." "Why do you call the foreigner your lord?" asked an injured Arishthanemi lying next to Nandi. Shiva had just departed after spending half an hour with Nandi and the other injured soldiers. If one saw the injured at this point, It would be impossible to believe that they had fought a battle just a few hours ago. They were talking jovially with each other. Some were ribbing their mates about how they had fallen for the red herring at the beginning of the battle. In the Kshatriya way, to laugh in the face of death was the ultimate mark of a man. "Because he is, my lord," answered Nandi simply. "But he's a foreigner, a caste unmarked foreigner," said the Arishtanemi. "He's a brave warrior, no doubt. But there are so many brave warriors in Meluha. What makes him so special? And why does he spend so much time with the royal family?" "I can't answer that, my friend. You will get to find out when the time is right." The Arishtanemi looked at Nandi quizzically, then shook his head and smiled. He was a soldier. He bothered himself only with the here and now. Bigger questions did not dwell too long in his mind. "In any case, I think the time is right to tell you that you are a brave man, my friend. I saw you fight despite your injury. You don't know the meaning of the word surrender. I would be proud to have you as my Bhrata." That was a big statement from the Arishtanemi. The Bhrata system that was followed in the Meluhan army meant that each soldier up to the rank of a captain was assigned a mate of equal rank. The two Bhratas would be like brothers who would always fight together and look out for each other. They would willingly fight the world for each other, would never love the same woman, and would always tell each other the truth, no matter how bitter. The Arishtanemi were elite soldiers of the empire, and Arishtanemi offered to be a Bhrata only to his own kind. Nandi knew that he could never really be the Arishtanemi's Bhrata. He had to stay with the Lord. But the honor of being offered the brotherhood of an Arishtanemi was enough to bring tears to Nandi's eyes. "Don't get teary on me now," chortled the Arishtanemi, wrinkling his nose in amusement. Nandi burst out in laughter as he slapped the Arishtanemi on his arm. "What is your name, my friend?" asked Nandi. "Kaustav," replied the Arishtanemi. "Some day we shall battle the main Chandravanshi army together, my friend. And by the grace of Lord Ram, we will kill all those bastards. By Lord Agni, we will!" "It was interesting how you got into the Naga's mind," said Brahaspati, as he watched Shiva getting the gash on his torso cleaned and dressed. Shiva had insisted that his injuries receive medical attention only after every other soldier's wounds had been tended. "Well, I can't really explain it," said Shiva. "How the Naga would think just seemed so obvious to me." "Well, I can explain it." "Really? What?" "The explanation is, you are the omnipotent N, whose name cannot be spoken," said Brahaspati, opening his eyes wide and conjuring his hands like an ancient magician. They burst out laughing, causing Shiva to rock back slightly. The military doctor gave Shiva a stern look, at which he immediately quietened down and let him finish tending to the wound. Having applied the Ayurvedic paste and covering it with a medicinal neem leaf, the doctor bandaged the wound with a cotton cloth. "You will need to change that every second day, foreigner," said the doctor, pointing at the bandage. "The royal doctor in Devagiri will be able to do it for you. And don't let this area get wet for a week. Also, avoid the somras for this period, since you will not be able to take a complete bath." "Oh, he doesn't need the somras," joked Brahaspati. "It's already done all the damage it can on him." Shiva and Brahaspati collapsed into helpless laughter again as the doctor walked away, shaking his head in exasperation. "But seriously," said Brahaspati, calming down, "why would they attack you? You've not harmed anybody." "I don't think the attack was on me. I think it was for Sati." "Sati? Why Sati? That's even more bizarre." "It probably wasn't specifically for Sati," said Shiva. "I think the target was the royal family. The primary target was probably the emperor. Since he wasn't there, they went for the secondary target, Sati. I think the aim was to kidnap a royal and use that person as leverage." Brahaspati did not respond. He seemed worried. Clasping his hands together and bringing them close to his face, he looked into the distance, deep in thought. Shiva reached into his pouch and pulled out his chillum, before carefully filling it with some dried marijuana. Brahaspati turned to look at his friend, unhappy at what he was doing. "I've never told you this before, Shiva, and I probably shouldn't, as, well, you are a free man," said Brahaspati. "But I consider you my friend, and it is my duty to tell you the truth. I have seen some Egyptian merchants in Karachappa with this marijuana habit. It's not good for you." "You're wrong, my friend," said Shiva, grinning broadly. "This is actually the best habit in the world." "You probably don't know, Shiva. This has many harmful side effects, and worst of all, it even harms your memory, causing untold damage to your ability to draw on past knowledge." Shiva's face suddenly became uncharacteristically serious. He gazed back at Brahaspati with a melancholic smile. "That is exactly why it's good, my friend. No idiot who smokes this is scared of forgetting." Shiva lit up his chillum, took a deep drag, and continued. They are scared of not forgetting. Brihaspati stared sharply at Shiva, wondering what terrible past could have prompted his friend to get addicted to the weed. Chapter 11. Neelkanth Unveiled. The next morning, the royal caravan resumed its journey to Devagiri after spending the night at a temporary camp in the clearing. It wasn't safe to travel at night, considering the circumstances. The wounded, including Nandi, were lying in the first 3 carriages and the 5th one. The royal family and Shiva travelled in the 4th. All the soldiers who had fought in the previous day's battle were given the privilege of riding on horses in relative comfort. Brihaspati and Kanakla walked along with the rest of the troops in mourning for the 3 slain Arishthanemi. Parvateshwar, Babhravya, and 2 other soldiers bore a makeshift wooden palanquin that carried 3 urns containing the ashes of the martyrs. The urns would be given to their families for a ceremonial submersion in the Saraswati. Shiva, Sati, and Nandi too wanted to walk, but the doctor insisted they were in no condition to do so. Parvateshwar walked with pride at the bravery of his soldiers. His boys, as he called them, had shown they were made of a metal forged in Lord Indra's own furnace. He cursed himself for not being there to fight with them. He castigated himself for not being there to protect his goddaughter, his Sati, when she was in danger. He prayed for the day when he would finally get a chance to destroy the cowardly Chandravanshis. He also silently pledged that he would anonymously donate his salary for the next 6 months to the families of the slain soldiers. "Even I didn't think he would fall to these levels," exclaimed Daksha in disgust. Shiva and Sati, comfortably asleep in the carriage, were woken up by Daksha's outburst. Virani looked up from the book that she was reading, narrowing her eyes to concentrate on her husband. "Who, Your Highness?" asked Shiva groggily. "Dilipa, that blight on humanity," said Daksha, barely concealing his loathing. Virani continued to stare hard at her husband. She slowly reached out, pulled Sati's hand in hers, brought it close to her lips and kissed it gently. Then she put her other hand protectively on top of Sati's hand. Sati looked at her mother warmly with a hint of a smile and rested her tired head on Virani's shoulders. "Who is Dilipa, Your Highness?" asked Shiva. "He is the Emperor of Swadweep," answered Daksha. "Everyone knows Sati is the apple of my eye, and they were possibly trying to kidnap her to force my hand." Shiva gazed at Daksha with sympathy. He could understand the outrage of the Emperor at the latest Chandravanshi treachery. "And to be reduced to the level of even using a Naga for this nefarious plan," said a furious Daksha. "This just shows what the Chandravanshis are capable of." "I don't know if the Naga was being used, Your Highness," said Shiva softly. It appeared as though he was the leader. Daksha, however, was too lost in his righteous anger to even explore Shiva's insinuation. "The Naga may have been the leader of this particular platoon, my lord, but he would almost certainly be under the overall command of the Chandravanshis. No Naga can be a leader. They are cursed people born with horrific deformities and diseases in this birth as a punishment for terrible crimes that they have committed in their previous birth. The Nagas are embarrassed to even show their face to anyone, but they have tremendous power and skills. Their presence strikes terror in the heart of all Meluhans and most Swadweepans as well. The Chandravanshis have sunk low enough to even consort with these deformed demons. They hate us so much that they don't even realize the sins they are bringing on their own souls by interacting with these Nagas." Shiva, Sati, and Virani continued to hear Daksha's ranting in silence. Turning towards Shiva, Daksha continued, "Do you see the kind of vermin we are up against, my lord? They have no code, no honor, and they outnumber us 10 to 1. We need your help, my lord. It's not just my people, but my family as well. We are in danger." "Your Highness, I will do all that I can to help you," said Shiva. "But I am not a general. I cannot lead an army against the Chandravanshis. I am just a simple tribal leader. What difference can one man make? At least let me announce your presence to the court and the people, my lord," urged Daksha. "Just spend a few weeks traveling through the empire. Your presence will raise the morale of the people. Look at the difference you made yesterday. We actually foiled a terrorist attack because of you, because of your presence of mind. Please, let me announce your arrival. That is all I ask." Shiva looked at Daksha's earnest face with trepidation. He could feel Sati and Virani's eyes on him, especially Sati's. "What am I getting myself into?" "All right," said Shiva in resignation. Daksha got up and hugged Shiva in an unyielding grip. "Thank you, my lord," exclaimed Daksha, as Shiva withdrew from his embrace to come up for air. I will announce your presence at the court tomorrow itself. Then you can leave for a tour of the empire in another 3 weeks. I will personally make all the arrangements. You will have a full brigade traveling with you for security. Parvateshwar and Sati will accompany you as well." "No," protested Virani in a harsh tone that Sati had never heard her mother use. "Sati is not going anywhere. I am not going to allow you to put our daughter's life in danger. She is staying with me in Devagiri." "Virani, don't be silly," said Daksha calmly. "You really think that anything would happen to Sati if the Lord Neelkanth was around? She is at the safest when she is with the Lord." "She is not going, and that is final," glared Virani in a firm voice, clutching Sati's hand tightly. Daksha turned towards Shiva, ignoring Virani. "Don't worry, my lord. I will have all the arrangements made. Parvateshwar and Sati will also travel with you. You will just have to restrain Sati sometimes." Shiva frowned. So did Sati. Daksha smiled genially. "My darling daughter has a tendency to be a little too brave at times. Like this one time, when she was just a child, she had jumped in all by herself with nothing but a short sword to save an old woman being attacked by a pack of wild dogs. She nearly got herself killed for her pains. It was one of the worst days of my life. I think it is the same impulsiveness which worries Virani as well." Shiva looked at Sati. There was no expression on her face. "That's why," continued Daksha, "I am suggesting that you keep her restrained. Then there should be no problem." Shiva glanced again at Sati. He felt a surge of admiration, coupled with the boundless love he felt for her. She did what I couldn't do. The next morning, Shiva found himself seated next to Daksha in the Meluhan royal court. The magnificence of the court left him wonderstruck. Since this was a public building, the usual Meluhan reticence and understated designs had been bypassed. It was built next to the great public bath. While the platform had been constructed of the standard kiln bricks, the structure itself, including the floor, was made of teak wood, easily carved and shaped, yet strong. Brawny wooden pillars had been laid into set grooves on the platform. The pillars had been extravagantly sculpted with celestial figures like apsaras, devas, and rishis, celestial nymphs, gods, and sages, amongst others. An ornately carved wooden roof that had been inlaid with gold and silver designs crowned the top of the pillars. Pennants of the holy blue color and royal red color hung from the ceiling. Each niche on the walls had paintings depicting the life of Lord Ram. But Shiva had little time to admire the glorious architecture of the court. Daksha's expectations would be apparent in his speech and were causing him considerable discomfort. "As many of you have heard," announced Daksha, "there was another terrorist attack yesterday. The Chandravanshis tried to harm the royal family on the road from Mount Mandar to Devagiri." Murmurs of dismay filled the court. The question troubling everyone was how the Chandravanshis had discovered the route to Mount Mandar. Shiva, meanwhile, kept reminding himself that this wasn't a terrorist attack. It was just a kidnap attempt. "The Chandravanshis had planned their attack with great deception," said Daksha, drowning out the murmurs with his booming voice. The talented architects of the court had designed the structure in a manner that any voice spoken from the royal platform resonated across the entire hall. "But we beat them back. For the first time in decades, we beat back a cowardly terrorist attack." An exultant roar went up in the court at this announcement. They had beaten back open military assaults from the Chandravanshis before, but until this day, the Meluhans had found no answer to the dreaded terrorist strikes. For the terrorists usually launched surprise attacks on non-military locations and fled before the Suryavanshi soldiers could arrive. Raising his hand to quieten the crowd, Daksha continued, "We beat them back because the time for truth to triumph has finally arrived. We beat them back because we were led by Father Manu's messenger. We beat them back because our time for justice has come." The murmurs grew louder. Had the Neelkanth finally arrived? Everyone had heard the rumors, but nobody believed them. There had been too many false declarations in the past. Daksha raised his hand. He waited for just enough time for the anticipation to build up, and then jubilantly bellowed, "Yes! The rumors are true! Our savior has come! The Neelkanth has come!" Shiva winced at being put on display on the royal platform with his cravat removed. The Meluhan elite thronged around him, their varying statements buzzing in Shiva's ears. "We heard the rumors, my lord, but we never believed them to be true. We have nothing to fear any more, my lord. The days of evil are numbered. Where are you from, my lord? Mount Kailash? Where's that, my lord? I would like to take a pilgrimage there. Answering these repeated questions and being confronted by the blind faith of these people disturbed Shiva. The moment he had a chance, he requested Daksha for permission to leave the court. A few hours later, Shiva sat in the quiet comfort of his chamber, considering what had happened at the court. The cravat was back around his neck. By the holy lake, can I really deliver these people from their troubles? What did you say, my lord? Asked Nandi, who was sitting patiently at a distance. The faith of your people makes me anxious, said Shiva, loud enough for Nandi to hear. If there was a one-on-one battle, I could take on any enemy to protect your people. But I am no leader, and I am certainly not a destroyer of evil. I am sure you can lead us to victory against anyone, my lord. You beat them back on the road to Devagiri. That wasn't a genuine victory, said Shiva dismissively. They were a small platoon, aiming to kidnap and not to kill. If we face a well-organized and large army whose aim is to kill, the situation may be very different. If you ask me, it appears that Meluha is against some formidable and ruthless enemies. Your country doesn't need faith in just one man. That is not the answer. Your people need to adapt to the changing times. Maybe you are too innocent in your way of life to actually take on such a cold-blooded enemy. A new system is needed. I am not some god who will magically solve your problems. You are right, my lord, said Nandi, with all the conviction of a simple, lucky man, not troubled by too many thoughts. A new system is required, and I obviously don't know what this new system should be. But I do understand one thing. More than 1,000 years back, we faced a similar situation, and Lord Ram came and taught us a better way. I am sure that similarly, you will lead us to a superior path. I am no Lord Ram, Nandi. How can this fool even compare me to Lord Ram, the Maryada Purushottam, the ideal man? You are better than Lord Ram, my lord, said Nandi. Stop this nonsense, Nandi. What have I done to even be compared with Lord Ram, let alone be considered better? But you will do the deeds that will place you above him, my lord. Just shut up. The preparations for Shiva's tour of the empire were in full swing. Shiva, however, still found time for Sati's dance lessons every afternoon. They were developing a quiet friendship. But Shiva agonized over the fact that while she showed respect, there was no softening of emotions in her, or expression of feelings. In the meantime, Shiva's tribe had been summoned to Devagiri, where they were given comfortable accommodation and jobs. Bhadra, however, was not to stay with the Gunas. He had instead been assigned to accompany the Neelkanth on his voyage. Veerbhadra, when the hell did you get this name? Shiva asked Bhadra, meeting him for the first time since his departure from Kashmir. Stupid reason, actually, smiled Bhadra, whose slight hump had disappeared completely thanks to the magical somras. On the journey here, I saved the caravan leader from a tiger attack. He gave me the title, For a Brave Man, before my name. You fought a tiger single-handed? Asked Shiva, clearly impressed. Bhadra nodded, feeling awkward. Well then, you really deserve to be called Veerbhadra. Yeah, right, smiled Bhadra, suddenly turning serious. The crazy label of destroyer of evil. Are you okay with this? You're not giving in to these pleas just because of your past, are you? I'm going with the flow right now, my friend. Something tells me that despite all my misgivings, I can actually help these people. These Meluhans are completely mad, no doubt, and I certainly can't do all that they expect of me. But I do feel that if I can make a difference, however small, I can reconcile with my past. If you are sure, then so am I. I will follow you anywhere. Don't follow. Walk beside me. Veerbhadra laughed and embraced his friend. I missed you, Shiva. I missed you too. Let's meet in the garden in the afternoon. I've got a great batch of marijuana. It's a deal. Brahaspati too had sought permission to travel with Shiva. He explained that a Mesopotamian ship carrying some rare chemicals essential for a critical experiment was to dock at the port city of Karachappa soon. His team had to check and obtain those materials anyway. It would be a good idea to do this while traveling with Shiva. Daksha said that he had no problems with Brahaspati joining the tour if the Lord was okay with it. Shiva agreed enthusiastically to the suggestion. 3 weeks after the court announcement about the Neelkanth, the day finally dawned for Shiva's tour of the empire. On the morning of the day itself, Daksha walked into Shiva's chambers. You could have summoned me, Your Highness, said Shiva with a namaste. You did not need to come here. It is my pleasure to come to your chambers, my lord, smiled Daksha, returning Shiva's greeting with a low bow. I thought I would introduce the physician who will be traveling with your entourage. She arrived from Kashmir last night." Daksha moved aside to let his escort show the doctor into the room. "Ayurvati!" exclaimed Shiva, his face lit up in a brilliant smile. "It's so good to see you again." "The pleasure is all mine, my lord," beamed Ayurvati, as she bent down to touch Shiva's feet. Shiva immediately moved back to neatly sidestep Ayurvati. "I've told you before, Ayurvati," said Shiva. "You are a giver of life. Please don't embarrass me by touching my feet." "And you are the Neelkanth, my lord, the destroyer of evil," said Ayurvati with devotion. "How can you deny me the privilege of being blessed by you?" Shiva shook his head in despair and let Ayurvati touch his feet. He gently touched her head and blessed her. A few hours later, Shiva, Sati, Parvateshwar, Brahaspati, Ayurvati, Kritika, Nandi, and Veerbhadra set off. Accompanying them was a brigade of 1,500 soldiers, 25 handmaidens, and 50 support staff for their security and comfort. They planned to travel by road till the city of Kotdwar on the Bias River. From there, they would use boats to travel to the port city of Karachappa. Then they would move due east to the city of Lothal. Finally, they would move north by road to the inland delta of the Saraswati, and then by boats back to Devagiri. Chapter 12. Journey through Meluha. "Who was Manu?" asked Shiva. "I've heard of him often, referred to as the Father." The caravan had been travelling for a few days on the broad road from Devagiri to Kotdwar. The central part consisted of a row of 7 carriages, identical to the ones used during the trip to Mandar. 5 of them were empty. Shiva, Sati, Brahaspati, and Kritika travelled in the second carriage. Parvateshwar was in the 5th, along with Ayurvati and his key brigadiers. The general's presence meant every rule had to be adhered to strictly. Hence, Nandi, whose rank did not allow him to travel in the carriage, was riding a horse with the rest of the cavalry. Veerbhadra had been inducted as a soldier in Nandi's platoon. Led by their respective captains, the brigade were in standard forward, rear, and side defence formations around the caravan. Both Brahaspati and Sati started answering Shiva simultaneously. "Lord Manu was the—" They both stopped talking. "After you, please, Brahaspati-ji," said Sati. "No, no," said Brahaspati with a warm smile. "Why don't you tell him the story?" He knew whose voice the Neelkanth would prefer. "Of course not, Brahaspati-ji. How can I supersede you? It would be completely improper." "Will somebody answer me, or are you two going to keep up this elaborate protocol forever?" asked Shiva. All right, laughed Brahaspati. "Don't turn blue all over now." "That is hilarious, Brahaspati," smiled Shiva. "Keep this up, and you might actually get someone to laugh in 100 years. As Brahaspati and Shiva chortled, Sati was astounded at the inappropriate manner in which the conversation was going on. But if the revered chief scientist seemed comfortable, she would not say anything. And in any case, how could she reprimand Shiva? Her code of honor forbade it. He had saved her life twice. "Well, you are right about Lord Manu being the father," said Brahaspati. "He is considered the progenitor of our civilization by all the people of India." "Including Swadweepans?" asked Shiva incredulously. "Yes, we believe so." In any case, Lord Manu lived more than 8,500 years before the present day. He was apparently a prince from South India, a land way beyond the Narmada River, where the earth ends and the great ocean begins. That land is the Sangam Tamil. Sangam Tamil? Yes, Sangam Tamil was then the richest and most powerful country in the world. Lord Manu's family, the Pandyas, had ruled that land for many generations. However, from the records left by Lord Manu, we know that by his time the kings had lost their old code of honor. Having fallen on corrupt ways, they spent their days in the pleasures of their fabulous wealth, rather than being focused on their duties and their spiritual life. Then a terrible calamity occurred. The seas rose and destroyed their entire civilization. "My God!" exclaimed Shiva. Lord Manu knew that this day would come, and had in fact prepared for it. He believed it was the decadence his old country had fallen into that had incurred the wrath of the gods. Wanting to escape the calamity, he led a band of his followers to the northern, higher lands in a fleet of ships. He established his first camp at a place called Mehragarh, deep in the western mountains of present-day Meluha. Wanting to establish a moral and just society, he gave up his princely robes and became a priest. In fact, the term for priests in India, Pandit, is a derivation of Lord Manu's family name, Pandya. Interesting. So how did Lord Manu's little band grow into the formidable India we see today? The years immediately following their arrival at Mehragarh were harsh on them. With each year's monsoon, the flooding and sea tides would become stronger. But after many years, and with the force of Lord Manu's prayers, the anger of the gods abated, and the waters stopped advancing. The sea, however, never receded to its original levels. This means that somewhere in the deep south, the sea still covers the ancient Sangam Tamil cities. We believe so, answered Brahaspati. Once the sea stopped advancing, Lord Manu and his men came down the mountains. They were shocked to see that the minor stream of Indus had become a massive river. Many other rivulets across northern India too had swollen, and 6 great rivers had emerged: Indus, Saraswati, Yamuna, Ganga, Sarayu, and Brahmaputra. Lord Manu said the rivers started flowing because the temperatures of our land rose with the wrath of the gods. With the rise in temperatures, huge channels of ice or glaciers frozen high in the Himalayas had started melting, creating the rivers. Villages and later cities grew on the banks of these rivers. Thus, our land of the 7 rivers, Sapt Sindhu, was born out of the destruction of the Sangam Tamil. 7? But you mentioned the creation of 6 rivers in North India. Yes, that's true. The 7th river already existed. It is the Narmada, and it became our southern border. Lord Manu strictly forbade his descendants to go south of the Narmada, and if they did so, they could never return. This is a law that we believe even the Chandravanshis adhere to. So what are Lord Manu's other laws? There are numerous laws, actually. They are all listed in an extensive treatise called the Manusmriti. Would you be interested in listening to the entire text? Tempting, smiled Shiva, but I think I'll pass. With your permission, my lords, perhaps we can further discuss Lord Manu's guidance of our society over lunch, suggested Kritika. At a short distance from the road on which the Neelkanth's caravan travelled, a small band of about 40 men trudged silently along the Bias. 1 and 2 men of the platoon carried a small coracle on his head. It was typical of this region. The locals made small and light boats made of bamboo, cane and rope, portable enough to be carried by a single man on his head. Each boat could ferry 2 people with relative safety and speed. At the head of the platoon was a young man with a proud battle scar adorning his face, his head crowned with a brown turban. A little ahead of him walked a hooded figure. With his head bowed, his eyes scrunched, he took slow, methodical steps, his mind lost in unfathomable thoughts. His breathing was hard. He brought his hand up languidly to rub his masked forehead. There was a leather bracelet on his right wrist, with a serpent Om symbol embroidered on it. "Vishwadhyum," said the hooded figure. "We will enter the river from here. Whenever we come close to populated areas, we will move away from the river to avoid detection. We have to reach Karachappa within 2 months." "Karachappa, my lord?" asked Vishwadhyum, surprised. "I was under the impression that we were to have a secret audience with the queen outside Lothal." "No," answered the hooded figure. "We will meet her outside Karachappa." "Yes, my lord," answered Vishwadhyum as he looked back in the direction of the road to Kotdwar. He knew that his lord would have dearly liked to make one more attempt to kidnap the princess. He also knew that it was foolhardy to endeavour to do so, considering the strength of the force accompanying the caravan. In any case, they were behind schedule for their main mission. They had to meet the queen urgently. Turning towards one of his soldiers, Vishwadhyum ordered, "Srikta, place your coracle in the river and give me your oar. I will row the lord through this part of the journey." Srikta immediately did as instructed. Vishwadhyum and the hooded figure were the first of the platoon to enter the river. Vishwadhyum had already started rowing as his men started placing their boats into the waters. At a distance further down the river, the hooded figure saw 2 women lounging carelessly on a boat. One of the women was sloppily splashing water from the side of the boat onto a friend who was making a hopeless attempt to avoid getting wet. Their childish game caused their boat to sway dangerously from side to side. The hooded figure saw that the women had not detected a crocodile that had entered the river from the opposite bank. Having spied what must have looked like an appetizing meal, the crocodile was swimming swiftly towards the women's boat. "Look behind you!" shouted the hooded figure to the women, as he motioned to Vishwadhyum to row rapidly in their direction. The women could not hear him from the distance. What they did see, however, was two men were rowing towards them. They could see one of them was almost a giant, covered from head to toe in a strange robe, his face covered with a mask. This man was making frantic gestures. Behind the duo were a large number of soldiers swiftly pushing their boats onto the river. That was all the warning the women needed. Thinking that the men were coming towards them with evil intent, the women put all their effort behind the oar and started hastily rowing away from the hooded figure's boat, into the path of the crocodile. "No!" shouted the hooded figure. He grabbed the oar from Vishwadhyum, using his powerful arms to row rapidly. He was shortening the distance between them and the women, but not fast enough. The crocodile closed in on the women's boat and, diving underwater, charged at the craft, rocking it with its massive body. The tiny vessel tilted and capsized, throwing the women into the Bias. Screams of terror rent the air as the women fought to stay afloat. The crocodile had moved too far ahead in its dash. Turning around, it swam towards the struggling women. The delay of those crucial seconds proved fateful for the women. The rescue boat arrived between the crocodile and them. Turning towards Vishwadhyum, the hooded figure ordered, "Save the women." Before Vishwadhyum could react, he had flung his robe aside and dived into the water. With his knife held tight between his teeth, he swam towards the advancing crocodile. Vishwadhyum pulled one of the women into the boat. She had already lost consciousness. Turning to the other woman, he reassured, "I'm coming back soon." Vishwadhyum turned and paddled vigorously towards the bank. On the way, he passed some of his other soldiers. "Row quickly! The Lord's life is in danger!" The other soldiers paddled towards the area where the hooded figure had dived into the river. The water had turned red, with blood from the battle raging underwater. The soldiers said a silent prayer to Lord Varun, the god of the water and the seas, hoping that the blood did not belong to their lord. One of the soldiers was about to jump into the water with his sword when the hooded figure emerged onto the surface, soaked in blood. It was that of the crocodile. He swam forcefully towards the other woman, who was on the verge of losing consciousness. Reaching her in the nick of time, he pulled her head out of the water. Meanwhile, two of the Chandravanshi soldiers dived off their coracle. "My lord, please get into the boat," said one of them. "We will swim ashore." "Help the woman first," replied the hooded figure. The soldiers pulled the unconscious woman onto the coracle. The hooded figure then carefully climbed aboard and rowed towards the shore. By the time the hooded figure reached the riverbank, the other woman had been revived by Vishwadhyum. She sat disoriented at the rapid chain of events. "Are you all right?" Vishwadhyum asked the woman. In answer, the woman looked beyond Vishwadhyum and screamed. Vishwadhyum turned around. On the riverbank, the hooded figure was coming ashore, carrying the other woman's limp body. His clothes were glued to his massive body. To the disoriented woman, the crocodile's blood all over his clothes seemed like that of her friend. "What have you done, you beast?" shrieked the woman. The Naga looked up abruptly. His eyes showed mild surprise. He, however, refrained from saying anything. He gently laid the unconscious woman on the ground. As he did so, the mask on his face came undone. The woman next to Vishwadhyum stared at him with horror. "Naga!" she screeched. Before Vishwadhyum could react, she leapt to her feet and fled, screaming, "Help! Help! A Naga is eating my friend!" The Naga looked at the fleeing woman with melancholic eyes. He shut the windows to his tormented soul and shook his head slightly. Vishwadhyum, meanwhile, turned to see his lord's face for the first time in years. He immediately lowered his gaze, but not before he had seen the rare emotion of intense pain and sorrow in his lord's normally expressionless eyes. Seething in anger, Vishwadhyum drew his sword, swearing to slay the ungrateful wench he had just saved. "No, Vishwadhyum," ordered the Naga. Pulling his mask back on, he turned to his other soldiers. "Revive her." "My lord," argued Vishwadhyum, "her friends will bring others here. Let's leave this woman to her fate and go." "No." "But my lord, someone may come soon. We must escape." "Not till we've saved her," said the Naga in his usual calm voice. The royal party, including Nandi and Veerbhadra, was sitting together enjoying their lunch in the courtyard of the rest house they had stopped at. Half the brigade, too, was eating their meal. They needed all the energy they could gather to march in the scorching heat. Parvateshwar had come in to check on the food arrangements. He was especially concerned about Sati's comfort. However, he had refused to join them. He was going to eat later with his soldiers. A loud commotion from the area of one of the perimeter guards disturbed Shiva. He got up to investigate, motioning to Brihaspati, Nandi, and Veerbhadra to remain seated. Parvateshwar too had heard the racket and was moving towards the uproar. "Please save her!" cried the woman. "A Naga is eating her alive!" "I'm sorry," answered the captain, "but we have strict orders. We are not to leave the vicinity of this rest house under any circumstances." "What is the matter?" asked Parvateshwar. Turning in surprise, the captain saluted and bowed low. "My lord," said the captain, "this woman alleges that a Naga has attacked her friend. She is asking us to help her." Parvateshwar looked at the woman intensely. He would have liked nothing more than to chase the Naga party and destroy them. But his orders were crystal clear. He was not to leave the Neelkanth and Sati. Their protection was the only objective of the brigade. But he was a Kshatriya. What kind of Kshatriya would he be if he didn't fight to protect the weak? Seething at the restrictions forced upon him, Parvateshwar was about to say something when Shiva appeared. "What's the matter?" asked Shiva. "My lord," said the captain in awe. He could not believe that he was actually getting a chance to converse with the Neelkanth. "This woman claims that her friend has been attacked by Nagas. We are concerned that it may be a trap. We have heard all about the Chandravanshi duplicity on the Mount Mandar road." Shiva heard his inner voice cry, "Go back! Help her!" Drawing his sword in one smooth motion, he told the woman, "Take me to your friend." Parvateshwar looked at Shiva with respect. It was mild, but it was respect all the same. He immediately drew his own sword and turned to the captain. "Follow us with your platoon. Brigadier Vraka, put the entire brigade on alert for any surprise attack. The princess must be kept safe at all costs." Shiva and Parvateshwar ran behind the woman, who seemed to lead them with ease. She was obviously a local. The captain trailed them with his platoon of 30 soldiers. After sprinting for the larger part of half an hour, they finally reached the riverside to find a dazed woman sitting on the ground. With heavy breaths, she was staring in shock at an imaginary vision in the distance. There was blood all over her clothes, but strangely, no injury to her. There were many footsteps that appeared to be coming out of the river and going back in. The captain looked at the woman who had led them here with suspicious eyes. Turning to his soldiers, he ordered, "Form a perimeter around the general and the Neelkanth. It could be a trap." "She was being eaten alive, I tell you," screeched the woman, absolutely stunned to see her friend alive and unharmed. "No, she wasn't," said Shiva calmly. He pointed at the corpse of the crocodile floating in the river. A large flock of crows had settled on the carcass, fighting viciously over its entrails. Somebody just saved her from that crocodile. "Whoever it was has rowed across the river, my lord," said the captain, pointing towards the heavy footmarks close to the river. "Why would a Naga risk his own life to save this woman?" asked Shiva. Parvateshwar seemed as surprised. This was completely unlike the usual bloodthirsty Nagas they had dealt with till now. "My lords," said the captain, addressing both Shiva and Parvateshwar, "the woman appears safe. Perhaps it is not wise for everybody to stay here. If I have your permission, I will escort these women back to their village and rejoin the caravan at Kotwar. You could retire to the guest house." "All right," said Parvateshwar. "Take 4 soldiers with you, just in case." Both Shiva and Parvateshwar walked back, baffled by this bizarre event. It was late in the evening. Shiva, Brihaspati, Nandi and Veerbhadra sat quietly around the campfire. Shiva turned to see Sati sitting at a distance on the rest house veranda, along with Ayurvati and Kritika, having a serious conversation. Parvateshwar, as usual, moved among his soldiers, security arrangements of the camp and the comfort of his boys. "It's ready, Shiva," said Veerbhadra, handing over the chillum to the Neelkanth. Shiva brought the pipe up to his lips and pulled hard. He relaxed visibly. Feeling the need for respite, he smoked some more before passing it back to his friend. Veerbhadra offered it to Brihaspati and Nandi, who both declined. Brihaspati stared at Shiva, who kept stealing glances at Sati. He smiled and shook his head. "What?" asked Shiva, who had noticed Brihaspati's gesture. "I understand your longing, my friend," whispered Brihaspati. "But what you are hoping for is quite difficult, almost impossible." "Well, it's so valuable it can't be easy, can it?" Brihaspati smiled and patted Shiva on his hand. Veerbhadra knew what his friend needed: dance and music. It always improved his mood. "Don't people sing and dance in this wretched country?" "Private Veerbhadra," said Nandi, his tone different with the subordinate. "Firstly, this country is not wretched. It's the greatest land in the world." Veerbhadra playfully put his hands together in a mock apology. "Secondly," continued Nandi, "we dance only when an occasion demands it, like the Holi or a public performance." "But the greatest joy of dancing is when you do it for no reason at all, Captain," said Veerbhadra. "I agree," said Shiva. Nandi immediately fell silent. Without any warning, Veerbhadra suddenly burst out into one of the folk songs of his region. Shiva smiled at his friend, for Veerbhadra was singing one of his favorites. Continuing to sing, Veerbhadra rose slowly and began dancing to the lilting tune, now accompanied by Shiva. The combination of marijuana and dance immediately changed his mood. Brahaspati stared at Shiva, first in shock and then with pleasure. He noticed a pattern in their dancing, a smooth six-step combination repeated rhythmically. Shiva reached out and pulled Brahaspati and Nandi to their feet. They joined in, tentative at first, but it was only a matter of time before a reluctant Brahaspati was dancing with abandon. The group moved together in a circle around the fire, the singing louder and livelier. Shiva suddenly darted out of the ring towards Sati. "Dance with me!" A flabbergasted Sati shook her head. "Oh, come on! If you can dance while your Guruji and I watch, why not here?" "That was for knowledge," said Sati. "So? Is it wrong if we're not dancing for knowledge?" "I didn't say that." "Fine, have it your way," said Shiva with a frustrated gesture. "Ayurvati, come!" A startled Ayurvati didn't know how to react. Before she could decide on a course of action, Shiva held her hand and pulled her into the circle. Veerbhadra lured Kritika in as well. The group danced boisterously and sang loudly, making a racket in an otherwise quiet night. Sati got up, clearly agitated, glared at Shiva's back, and ran into the guest house. Shiva's anger rose even higher as he noticed her absence when he turned towards the veranda. Damn! He got back to his dance, his heart in a strange mixture of pain and joy. He turned once again towards the veranda. There was nobody. Who's behind that curtain? Shiva was dragged into the next move by Veerbhadra. It was a few moments later that Shiva was in a position to look again at the veranda. He could see Sati, outlined behind the curtain, staring at him. Only at him. Wow! A surprised and delighted Shiva swung back into his dance, moving in his prime form. He had to impress her. Chapter 13. Blessings of the Impure. Kotdwar was in all its glory to receive the Neelkanth. Torches had been lit across the fort perimeter as if it was Diwali. Red and blue pennants, embellished with the Suryavanshi sun, had been hung down the fort walls. In a rare breach of protocol, the governor had come outside the city to personally receive the Neelkanth. After the formal exhibition of the Neelkanth for the Kotdwar elite at the local court, a public function had been organized the following day. 65,000 people, practically the entire population of Kotdwar, had converged for the event. Considering the vast number of attendees, the event had been organized outside the city platform to ensure that every person could be accommodated. A speech by Shiva convinced the Kotdwarans that Meluha's days of trouble were soon to end. The remarkable effect Shiva seemed to have on the people was a revelation to him. Though he was careful with his words, telling them that he would do all he could to support the people of Meluha, the public made their own interpretations. "The cursed Chandravanshis will finally be destroyed," said one man. "We don't have to worry about anything now. The Neelkanth will take care of everything," said a woman. Seated with Brahaspati and Sati on the speaker's platform, Parvateshwar was deeply unhappy at the public's reaction. Turning to the chief scientist, he said, "Our entire society is based on laws, and we are not supposed to blindly follow anyone. We are expected to solve our problems ourselves and not hope for miracles from a solitary man. What has this man done to deserve such blind faith?" "Parvateshwar," said Brahaspati politely, for he greatly respected him, "I think Shiva is a good man. I think he cares enough to want to do something. And aren't good intentions the first step towards any good deed?" Parvateshwar didn't completely agree. Never a believer in the legend of the Neelkanth, the general thought that every man or woman had to earn his station in life with training and preparation, not just get it on a silver platter because of a blue throat. Yes, that may be true, but intentions aren't enough. They have to be backed by ability as well. Here we are, putting an untrained man on a pedestal and acting as though he is our savior. For all we know, he might lead us to complete disaster. We're acting on faith, not logic or laws or even experience. Sometimes one needs a little bit of faith when faced with a difficult situation. Rational answers don't always work. We also need a miracle." "You're talking about miracles? A scientist?" "You can have scientific miracles too, Parvateshwar," smiled Brahaspati. Parvateshwar was distracted by the sight of Shiva stepping off the platform. As he came down, there was a surge of people wanting to touch his hand. The soldiers, led by Nandi and Veerbhadra, were holding them back. There was one blind man amongst them who looked like he might be injured in the melee. "Nandi, let that man through," said Shiva. Nandi and Veerbhadra lowered the rope to let him in. Another man shouted, "I am his son. He needs me to guide him." "Let him in as well," said Shiva. The son rushed in and held his father's hand. The blind man, who seemed lost without his son's hand, smiled warmly as he recognized the familiar touch. He was led close to Shiva, and the son said, "Father, the Neelkanth is right in front of you. Can you sense his presence?" Copious tears flowed from the blind man's eyes. Without thinking, he bent down to try and touch Shiva's feet. His son cried out in shock as he pulled the man back sharply. "Father!" scolded the son. Shiva was stunned by the harshness in the son's tone compared to the loving manner in which he had spoken so far. "What happened?" "I'm sorry, my lord," apologized the son. "He didn't mean to. He just lost control due to your presence." "I'm sorry, my lord," said the blind man, his tears flowing stronger. "Sorry for what?" "He's a Vikarma, my lord," said his son. "Ever since disease blinded him 20 years ago, he should not have tried to touch you." Sati, who was now standing near Shiva, had heard the entire conversation. She felt sympathy for the blind man. She knew the torment of having even your touch considered impure. But what he had tried to do was illegal. "I'm sorry, my lord," continued the blind man. "But please don't let your anger with me stop you from protecting our country. It is the greatest land that Paramatma created. Save it from the evil Chandravanshis. Save us, my lord." The blind man continued to cry, folding his hands in a penitent namaste. Shiva was shaken by the dignity of the blind man. He still loves a country that treats him so unfairly. Why? Even worse, he doesn't even appear to think he's being treated unfairly. Tears welled up in Shiva's eyes as he realized that he was looking at a man whom fate had been very unkind to. "I will stop this nonsense." Shiva stepped forward and bent down. The flabbergasted son trembled in disbelief as he saw the Neelkanth touch the feet of his Vikarma father. The blind man was at sea for a moment. When he did understand what the Neelkanth had done, his hand shot up to cover his mouth in shock. Shiva rose and stood in front of the blind man. "Bless me, sir, so that I find the strength to fight for a man as patriotic as you." The blind man stood dumbstruck. His tears dried up in his bewilderment. He was about to collapse when Shiva took a quick step forward to hold him, lest he fall to the ground. The blind man found the strength to say, "Vijay Bhav, may you be victorious." The son caught hold of his father's limp body as Shiva released him. The entire crowd was stunned into silence by what the Neelkanth had done. Forget the gravity of touching a Vikarma. The Neelkanth had just asked to be blessed by one. Shiva turned to see Parvateshwar's enraged face. Shiva had broken the law, broken it brazenly and in public. Next to him stood Sati, her face, her eyes, her entire demeanor expressionless. What the hell is she thinking? Brihaspati and Sati entered Shiva's chambers as soon as he was alone. Shiva's smile at seeing his two favorite people in the world disappeared on hearing Sati's voice. "You must get a Shuddhikaran done." He looked at her and answered simply, "No." "No? What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. Nahi. Nako," said Shiva, adding the words for no in the Kashmiri and the Kotwa dialect for good measure. "Shiva," said Brihaspati, keeping his composure, "this is no laughing matter. I agree with Sati. The governor too was worried about your safety and has arranged for a pandit. He waits outside as we speak. Get the ceremony done now." "But I just said I don't want to." "Shiva," said Sati, reverting to her usual tone, "I respect you immensely, your valor, your intelligence, your talent. But you are not above the law. You have touched a Vikarma. You have to get a Shuddhikaran. That is the law." "Well, if the law says that my touching that poor blind man is illegal, then the law is wrong." Sati was stunned into silence by Shiva's attitude. "Shiva, listen to me," argued Brihaspati. "Not doing a Shuddhikaran can be harmful to you. You are meant for bigger things. You are important to the future of India. Don't put your own person at risk out of obstinacy." "It's not obstinacy. You tell me honestly, how can it harm me if I happen to touch a wronged man, who, I might add, still loves his country despite the way he's been ostracized and ill-treated?" "He may be a good man, Shiva, but the sins of his previous birth will contaminate your fate," said Brihaspati. "Then let them. If the weight on that man's shoulders lessens, I will feel blessed." What are you saying, Shiva? Asked Sati. Why should you carry the punishment of someone else's sins? Firstly, I don't believe in the nonsense that he was punished for the sins of his previous birth. He was just infected by a disease, plain and simple. Secondly, if it is my choice to carry the weight of someone else's so-called sins, why should it matter to anyone? It matters because we care about you, cried Brihaspati. Come on, Sati, said Shiva. Don't tell me you believe in this rubbish. It's not rubbish. Look, don't you want me to fight for you? Stop this unfairness that your society has subjected you to. Is that what this is all about? Me? Asked Sati, outraged. No, retorted Shiva immediately, then added, Actually, yes. This is also about you. It is about the Vikarma and the unfairness that they have to face. I want to save them from leading the life of an outcast. I don't need your protection. I cannot be saved, shouted Sati before storming out of the room. Shiva glared at her retreating form in irritation. What the hell is it with this woman? She's right, Shiva, advised Brihaspati. Don't go there. You agree with her on this Vikarma business? Answer with your heart, Brihaspati. Don't you think it's unfair? I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about Sati. Shiva continued to glare at Brihaspati defiantly. Everything in his mind, body and soul told him that he should pursue Sati, that his life would be meaningless without her, that his soul's existence would be incomplete without her. Don't go there, my friend, reiterated Brihaspati. The caravan left the river city of Kotdwar on a royal barge, led and followed by 2 large boats of equal size and grandeur as a royal vessel. Typical of the Meluhan security system, the additional boats were to confuse any attacker about which boat the royal family may be on. The entire royal party was in the second boat. Each of the 3 large boats was manned by a brigade of soldiers. Additionally, there were 5 small and quick cutter boats on both sides of the royal convoy, keeping pace and protecting the sides in case of an ambush. When the monsoon is not active, my lord, said Ayurvati, the rivers are the best way to travel. Though we have good roads connecting all major cities, it cannot match the rivers in terms of speed and safety. Shiva smiled at Ayurvati politely. He was not in the frame of mind for much conversation. Sati had not spoken to Shiva since that fateful day at Kotdwar, when he had refused to undergo a Shuddhikaran. The royal barge stopped at many cities along the river. The routine seemed much the same. Extreme exuberance would manifest itself in each city on the arrival of the Neelkanth. It was a kind of reaction unnatural in Meluha, but then a Neelkanth didn't grace the land every day. Why? Asked Shiva of Brihaspati, after many days of keeping quiet about the disquiet in his troubled heart. Why, what? You know what I'm talking about, Brihaspati, said Shiva, narrowing his eyes in irritation. She genuinely believes that she deserves to be a Vikarma, answered Brihaspati with a sad smile. Why? Perhaps because of the manner in which she became a Vikarma. How did it happen? It happened during her earlier marriage. What? Sati was married? Yes. That was around 90 years back. It was a political marriage with one of the noble families of the empire. Her husband's name was Chandantwaj. She got pregnant and went to the Maika to deliver the child. It was the monsoon season. Unfortunately, the child was stillborn. Oh my God, said Shiva, empathizing with the pain Sati must have felt. But it was worse. On the same day, her husband, who had gone to the Narmada to pray for the safe birth of their child, accidentally drowned. On that cursed day, her life was destroyed. Shiva stared at Brihaspati, too stunned to react. She became a widow and was declared a Vikarma the same day. But how can the husband's death be considered her fault? Argued Shiva. That is completely ridiculous. She wasn't declared a Vikarma because of her husband's death. It was because she gave birth to a stillborn child. But that could be due to any reason. Maybe there was a mistake that the local doctors committed. That doesn't happen in Meluha, Shiva, said Brihaspati calmly. Having a stillborn child is probably one of the worst ways for a woman to become a Vikarma. Only giving birth to a Naga child could be considered worse. Thank God that didn't happen, because then she would have been completely ostracized from society. This has to be changed. The concept of Vikarma is unfair. Brihaspati looked at his friend intensely. You might save the Vikarma, Shiva, but how do you save a woman who doesn't want to be saved? She genuinely believes she deserves this punishment. Why? I'm sure she's not the first Meluhan woman to give birth to a stillborn. There must have been others before her. There will be many more after her. She was the first royal woman to give birth to a stillborn. Her fate has been a source of embarrassment to the emperor. It raises questions about his ancestry." "How would it raise questions about his lineage? Sati is not his birth daughter. She would also have come from Micah, right?" "No, my friend. That law was relaxed for families of nobility around 250 years back. Apparently, in the national interest, noble families were allowed to keep their birth children. Some laws can be amended, provided 90% of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas above a particular chosen tribe and job status vote for the change. There have been rare instances of such unanimity. This was one of them. Only one man opposed this change. Who? Lord Satyadhwaj, the grandfather of Parvateshwar. Their family had vowed not to have any birth children since this law was passed. Parvateshwar honors that promise to this day. "But if the birth law could be changed," said Shiva, working things out, "why couldn't the law of the Vikarma?" "Because there aren't enough noble families affected by that law. That is the harsh truth." "But all this goes completely against Lord Ram's teachings." "Lord Ram's teachings also say that the concept of the Vikarma is correct. Don't you want to question that?" Shiva glanced at Brihaspati silently, before looking out over the river. "There is nothing wrong with questioning Lord Ram's laws, my friend," said Brihaspati. "There were many times when he himself stood down because of someone else's rationale. The question is that what are your motives for wanting to change the law? Is it because you genuinely think the law itself is unfair? Or is it because you are attracted to Sati and you want to remove an inconvenient law which stands in your path?" "I genuinely think the Vikarma law is unfair. I felt that from the moment I found out about it. Even before I knew Sati was a Vikarma." "But Sati doesn't think the law is unfair." "But she's a good woman. She doesn't deserve to be treated this way." "She's not just a good woman. She's one of the finest I have ever met. She's beautiful, honest, straightforward, brave and intelligent, everything a man could want in a woman. But you are not just any man. You are the Neelkanth." Shiva turned around and rested his hands on the craft's railing. He looked into the distance at the dense forest along the riverbanks as their boat glided across the water. The soothing evening breeze fanned Shiva's long locks. "I've told you before, my friend," said Brihaspati. "Because of that unfortunate blue throat, every decision you take has many ramifications. You have to think many times before you act." It was late in the night. The royal convoy had just set sail from the city of the Satgangar on the Indus. The emotions at Satgangar had erupted in the now predictable routine of exuberance at the sight of the Neelkanth. The savior of their civilization had finally arrived. Their savior, however, was in his own private hell. Sati had maintained her distance from Shiva for the last few weeks. He was torn, experiencing pain and dismay at depths he didn't think fathomable. The convoy's next stop was the famous city of Mohenjo-daro, or the platform of Mohan. The city on the mighty Indus was dedicated to a great philosopher-priest called Lord Mohan, who lived in this region many thousands of years ago. Once he had met with the people of Mohenjo-daro, Shiva expressed a desire to visit the temple of Lord Mohan. This temple stood outside the main city platform, further down the Indus. The governor of Mohenjo-daro had offered to take the Lord Neelkanth there in a grand procession. Shiva, however, insisted on going alone. He felt drawn to the temple. He felt that it would have some solutions for his troubled heart. The temple itself was simple, much like Lord Mohan himself. A small nondescript structure announced itself as the birthplace of the sage. The only sign of the temple's significance was the massive gates in the 4 cardinal directions of the compound. As instructed by Shiva, Nandi and Veerbhadra, along with their platoon, waited outside. Shiva, with his comforting cravat back around his neck, walked up the steps feeling tranquil after a long time. He rang the bell at the entrance and sat down against a pillar with his eyes shut in quiet contemplation. Suddenly, an oddly familiar voice asked, "How are you, my friend?" Chapter 14. Pandit of Mohenjo-daro. Shiva opened his eyes to behold a man who was almost a replica of the Pandit he had met at the Brahma temple in what seemed like another life. He sported a similar long, flowing white beard and a big white mane. He wore a saffron dhoti and angvastram. The wizened face bore a calm and welcoming smile. If it wasn't for this Pandit's much taller frame, Shiva could have easily mistaken him for the one he had met at the Brahma temple. "How are you, my friend?" repeated the Pandit, sitting down. "I'm all right, Panditji," said Shiva, using the Indian term ji as a form of respect. He couldn't follow why, but the intrusion was welcome to him. It almost seemed as though he was drawn to this temple because he was destined to meet the Pandit. "Do all Pandits in Meluha look alike?" The man smiled warmly. "Not all the Pandits, just us." "And who might us be, Panditji?" "The next time you meet one of us, we will tell you," said the Pandit cryptically. "That is a promise." "Why not now?" "At this point in time, our identity is not important," smiled the Pandit. "What is important is that you are disturbed about something. Do you want to talk about it?" Shiva took a deep breath. Gut instinct told him that he could trust this man. "There is this task that I supposedly have to do for Meluha." "I know, though I wouldn't dismiss the Neelkanth's role as a task. He does much more than that." Pointing at Shiva's throat, the Pandit continued, "Pieces of cotton cannot cover divine brilliance." Shiva looked up with a wry smile. "Well, Meluha does seem like a wonderful society, and I want to do all I can to protect it from evil." "Then what is the problem?" "The problem is that I find some grossly unfair practices in this nearly perfect society, and this is inconsistent with the ideals that Meluha aspires to." "What practices are you referring to?" asked the Pandit. "For example, the way the Vikarma are treated." "Why is it unfair?" "How can anyone be sure that these people committed sins in their previous birth, and that their present sufferings are a result of that? It might be sheer bad luck, or a random act of nature." "You're right, it could be. But do you think that the fate of the Vikarma is about them personally?" "Isn't it?" "No, it isn't," explained the Pandit. "It is about the society as a whole. The Vikarma acceptance of their fate is integral to the stability of Meluha." Shiva frowned. "What any successful society needs, O Neelkanth, is flexibility with stability." "Why would you need flexibility?" "Because every single person has different dreams and capabilities. The birth son of a warrior could have the talent to be a great businessman. Then society needs to be flexible enough to allow this son to change his vocation from his father's profession. Flexibility in a society allows change so that all its members have the space to discover their true selves and grow to their potential. And if every person in a society achieves his true potential, society as a whole also achieves its true potential." "I agree. But what does this have to do with the Vikarma?" "I'll come to the obvious question in a bit. Just bear with me," said the Pandit. "If we believe that flexibility is the key to a successful society, the Micah system is designed to achieve it in practice. No child knows what the professions of his birth parents are. They are independent to pursue what their natural talent inspires them to do." "I agree. The Micah system is almost breathtakingly fair. A person can credit or blame only himself for what he does with his life, nobody else. But this is about flexibility. What about stability?" "Stability allows a person the freedom of choice, my friend. People can pursue their dreams only when they are living in a society where survival is not a daily threat. In a society without security and stability, there are no intellectuals or businessmen or artists or geniuses. Man is constantly in fight or flight mode, nothing better than an animal. Where is the chance then to allow ideas to be nurtured or dreams to be pursued? That is the way all humans were before we formed societies. Civilization is very fragile. All it takes is a few decades of chaos for us to forget humanity and turn into animals. Our base natures can take over very fast. We can forget that we are sentient beings with laws and codes and ethics." "I understand. The tribes in my homeland were no better than animals. They didn't even want to live a better life." "They didn't know a better life was possible, Neelkanth. That is the curse of constant strife. It makes us forget the most beautiful part of being human. That is why society must remain stable so that we don't put each other in a situation of having to fight for survival." "All right. But why would letting people achieve their potential cause instability? In fact, it should make people happier with their lives, and hence society would become increasingly steady." True, but only partially. People are happy when they change their lives for the better. But there are two situations in which change can lead to chaos. First, when people face a change by others, situations that they cannot understand, this scares them almost as much as the fear of death. When change happens too fast, they resist it. Yes, change forced by others is difficult to accept. And too rapid a change causes instability. That is the bedrock of the Lord Ram's way of life. There are laws which help a society change slowly and allow it to remain stable. At the same time, it allows its citizens the freedom to follow their dreams. He created an ideal balance of stability and flexibility. You mentioned a second situation? The second is when people cannot make the transition they want to improve their lives for reasons beyond their control. Say, there is an exceptional warrior who loses his hand-eye coordination due to a disease. He's still a fighter, but not extraordinary anymore. The odds are that he will be frustrated about what he perceives as an injustice meted out to him. He is likely to blame his doctor or even society at large. Many such discontented people can become a threat to society as a whole. Shiva frowned. He didn't like the logic, but he also knew that one of the main reasons the Prakratis had rejected the peace offer by his uncle years ago was because their diseased and old chief was desperate to live up to his initial reputation of being an exceptional warrior who could have defeated the Gunas. Their combined rage can lead to unrest, even violence, said the Pandit. Lord Ram sensed that, and that is why the concept of Vikarma came into being. If you make a person believe that his misfortune in this birth is due to his sins in his previous birth, he will resign himself to his fate and not vent his fury on society at large. But I disagree that ostracizing the Vikarma can work. It would lead to more suppressed anger. But they are not ostracized. Their living is subsidized by the government. They can still interact with family members. They are allowed to gain personal excellence in their chosen fields wherever possible. They can also fight to protect themselves. What they can't do is ever be in a position to influence others. And this system has worked for 1,000 years. Do you know how common rebellion was in India before Lord Ram created this empire? And most of the times, the rebellions were not led by far-sighted men who thought they would create a better way of life for the common man. They were led by men discontented with their lot in life, people very much like the Vikarma. And these rebellions usually caused chaos, and decades went by before order was restored. So you are saying that anyone who is frustrated with life should simply resign himself to being a Vikarma? Asked Shiva. Why? For the larger good of society. Shiva was aghast. He could not believe what he was hearing. He deeply disliked the arguments being presented to him. I'm sorry, but I think this system is completely unfair. I have heard that almost 1/20th of the people in Meluha are Vikarma. Are you going to keep so many people as outcast forever? This system needs to change. You can change it. You are the Neelkanth. But remember, no system is absolutely perfect. In Lord Ram's time, a lady called Manthara triggered a series of events which led to the loss of millions of lives. She had suffered terribly due to her physical deformities, and then fate put her in a position of influence over a powerful queen and thus over the entire kingdom. Therefore, the karma of one maladjusted victim of fate led to the mass destruction that followed. Would it not have been better for everybody if this person had been declared a Vikarma? There are no easy answers. Having said that, maybe you're right. Maybe there are so many Vikarma now that it can lead to a tipping point, tumble society into chaos. Do I have the solution to this problem? No. Maybe you could find it. Shiva turned his face away. He believed in his heart that the Vikarma system was unfair. Are you concerned about all the Vikarma, O Neelkanth? Asked the Pandit. Or just one in particular? What's the Lord doing in there? Asked Nandi. He's taking too long. I don't know, said Veerbhadra. All I know is that if Shiva says he needs to do something, I accept it. Why do you call the Lord by his name? Because that's his name. Nandi smiled at the simple answer and turned to look at the temple. Tell me, Captain, said Veerbhadra, coming close to Nandi. Is Kritika spoken for? Spoken for? I mean, continued Veerbhadra, is she off limits? Off limits? You know what I mean, said Veerbhadra, turning beet red. She is a widow, said Nandi. Her husband died 15 years back." "Oh, that's terrible." "Yes, it is," said Nandi, as he smiled at Veerbhadra. "But to answer your question, she's not spoken for right now." "My lady, may I say something?" asked Kritika. Sati turned from the guest room window to look at Kritika with a surprised frown. "Have I ever stopped you from speaking your mind? A true Suryavanshi always speaks her mind." "Well," said Kritika, "sometimes it may not be that harmful to lose control of yourself." Sati frowned even more. Kritika spoke quickly before her courage deserted her. "Forget about him being the Neelkanth, my lady. Just as a man, I think he's the finest I've seen. He's intelligent and brave, funny and kind, and worships the ground you walk on. Is that really so bad?" Sati glared at Kritika. She didn't know if she was more upset at Kritika for what she was saying, or at herself for having feelings which were apparently so evident. Kritika continued. "Maybe, just maybe, breaking the rules can lead to happiness." "I am a Suryavanshi," said Sati, her voice dropping. "Rules are all that I live by. What have I got to do with happiness? Don't dare speak to me about this again." "Yes, there is this particular Vikarma," admitted Shiva. "But that is not why I think the Vikarma law is unfair." "I know that," said the Pandit. "But I also know that what troubles you right now is your relationship with that one in particular. You don't want her to think that you would change the law, however justified, just to get her. Because if Sati believes that, she will never come to you." "How do you know her name?" asked Shiva, flabbergasted. "We know many things, my friend. My entire life is meaningless without her." "I know," smiled the Pandit. "Perhaps I can help you." Shiva frowned. This was unexpected. "You want her to reciprocate your love. But how can she, when you don't even understand her?" "I think I understand her. I love her." "Yes, you do love her, but you don't understand her. You don't know what she wants." Shiva kept quiet. He knew the Pandit was right. He was thoroughly confused about Sati. "You can hazard a guess towards what she wants," continued the Pandit, "with the help of the theory of transactions." "What?" asked a flummoxed Shiva. "It makes up the fabric of society." "Excuse me, but what does this have to do with Sati?" "Indulge me for a little while, Neelkanth," said the Pandit. "You know the cloth that you wear is created when cotton threads are woven together, right?" "Yes," answered Shiva. "Similarly, transactions are threads that, when woven together, make up a society, its culture, or, in the case of a person, weaves together their character." Shiva nodded. "If you want to know the strength of a cloth, you inspect the quality of its weave. If you want to understand a person's character, look closely at their interpersonal behavior or their transactions." "All right," said Shiva, slowly absorbing the Pandit's words. "But transactions are—" "I'll explain," interrupted the Pandit. "Transactions are interactions between two individuals. It could be trading goods, like a Shudra farmer offering grain for money from a Vaishya. But it could also be beyond material concerns, like a Kshatriya offering protection to a society in return for power." Shiva nodded in agreement. "Transactions are about give and take." "Exactly. So going by this logic, if you want something from someone, you have to give that person something they want." "So what do you think she wants?" asked Shiva. "Try and understand Sati's transactions. What do you think she wants?" "I don't know. She's very confusing." "No, she isn't. There is a pattern. Think. She is probably the most eminent Vikarma in history. She has the power to rebel if she wants to. She certainly has the spirit, since she never backs off from a fight. But she does not rebel against the Vikarma law. Neither does she fade into the background like most Vikarmas and live her life in anonymity. She follows the commandments, and yet she does not whine and complain to others. However unfairly life treats her, she conducts herself with dignity. Why? Because she's a righteous person? That she is, no doubt. But that is not the reason. Remember, in a transaction, you give something because you want something in return. She is accepting an unfair law without trying to make anyone feel guilty about it. And, most importantly, she continues to use her talents to contribute to the good of society whenever she can. What do you think a person who's giving all this in her transactions with society wants in return? "Respect," answered Shiva. "Exactly," beamed the Pandit. "And what do you think you do when you try to protect such a person?" "Disrespect her." "Absolutely. I know it comes naturally to you to want to protect any good person who appears in need. But control that feeling in relation to Sati. Respect her, and she will feel irresistibly drawn towards you. She gets many things from the people who love her. What she doesn't get is what she craves the most: respect." Shiva looked at the Pandit with a grateful smile. He had found his answer: respect. After 2 weeks, the Neelkanth's convoy reached the city of Karachappa at the confluence of the Indus into the Arabian Sea. It was a glittering city, which had long grown beyond the one platform it was built on. The Dvitya, or second platform, had been erected 50 years ago on an even grander scale than the first. The Dvitya platform was where the Karachappa elite lived. The governor, a diminutive Vaishya called Juleshwar, had heard of and followed the new tradition of receiving the Neelkanth outside the city. Karachappa, with its 100,000 citizens, was at its heart a frontier trading city. Therefore, it was an act of foresight by Lord Brahmanayak, Emperor Daksha's father, to have appointed a Vaishya as its governor over 100 years ago. Juleshwar had ruled the city extraordinarily well, gilding its fate in gold, and was considered its wisest and most efficient governor ever. Karachappa had long overtaken Lothal on the eastern part of the empire to become Meluha's premier city of commerce. While foreigners such as Mesopotamians and Egyptians were allowed into this liberal city, they were not allowed to travel further into Meluha without express royal permission. Juleshwar escorted the Neelkanth on an excursion to the Arabian Sea on his very first day in Karachappa. Shiva had never seen the sea and was fascinated by the near infinite expanse of water. He spent many hours at the port, where Juleshwar proudly expounded on the various types of ships and vessels manufactured at the shipyard attached to the Karachappa port. Brihaspati accompanied them to the port to check on the imports due for him from the Mesopotamian merchants. At the evening state dinner organized for Shiva, Juleshwar proudly announced that a yagna, a ceremonial fire sacrifice, was being organized the next day in honor of the Neelkanth, under the auspices of Lord Varun and the legendary Ashwini Kumar twins. The Ashwini Kumar twins were celebrated ancient seafarers who had navigated ocean routes from Meluha to Mesopotamia and beyond. Their maps, guidance, and stories were a source of inspiration and learning for the city of seamen. After dinner, Shiva visited the chambers where Sati and Kritika were housed. "I was wondering," said Shiva, still careful with Sati since she had gone back to being formal with him, "will you be coming to the yagna tomorrow?" "I am very sorry, Lord Neelkanth," said Sati courteously, "but it may not be possible for me to attend the ceremony. I am not allowed to attend such yagnas." Shiva was about to say that nobody would question her since she would be attending with the Neelkanth, but he thought better of it. "Perhaps we could have a dance practice tomorrow. I cannot remember the last time we had a dance session." "That would be nice. I have not had the benefit of your instruction in a long time," said Sati. Shiva nodded unhappily at Sati. The freeze in their relationship tormented him. Bidding goodbye, he turned to leave. Kritika glanced at Sati, shaking her head imperceptibly. Chapter 15. Trial by Fire. The little boy hurried through a dusty goat trail, trying to avoid the sharp stones, bundling into his fur coat. The dense, wet forest encroached on the path menacingly. It was difficult to see beyond the trees lining the narrow path. The boy was sure that there were terrible monsters lurking in the dense foliage, waiting to pounce on him if he slowed down. His village was but a few hours away. The sun was fast setting behind the mountains. Monsters loved the darkness. He had heard his mother and grandmother say repeatedly when he was being difficult. He would have liked being accompanied by an elder, as monsters didn't trouble the elders. His heart skipped a beat as he heard a strange, heaving sound. He immediately drew out his short sword, suspecting an attack from behind. His friends had heard many stories about the monsters of the forests. The cowards never attacked from the front. He stood still, straining to determine the direction of the sound. It had a peculiar, repetitive rhythm and seemed vaguely familiar. He felt as though he had heard it before. The heaving was now accompanied by a heavy, grunting male voice. This was not a monster. The boy felt excitement run through his body. He had heard his friends whisper and giggles about it, but he had never seen the act himself. This was his chance. He crept slowly into the foliage, his sword dangling by his side. He did not have to go too far when he came upon the source of the sound. It came from a small clearing. He hid behind a tree trunk and peeped. It was a couple. They seemed to be in a hurry. They had not even disrobed completely. The man was extraordinarily hairy, almost like a bear. The boy could see just his back from this angle. He had a frontal view of the woman. She was astonishingly beautiful. Her wavy hair, long and lustrous. The partly torn blouse revealed a firm breast with deep red welts due to the brutal intercourse. Her skirt had been ripped and revealed exquisite long legs. The boy was excited beyond imagination. Wait till his best friend Bhadra heard of this. As he enjoyed the show, his disquiet grew. Something seemed amiss. The man was in the throes of passion while the woman lay passive, almost dead. Her hands lay lifeless by her side. Her mouth was tightly shut. She was not whispering encouragements to her lover. Were those tears of ecstasy rolling down her cheeks? Or was she being forced? But how could that be? The man's knife lay within the woman's reach. She could have picked up the blade and stabbed him if she wanted. The boy shook his head. He tried to silence his conscience. Just shut up. Let me look. And then came the moment that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The woman's eyes suddenly fell upon him. "Help!" she cried out. "Please help!" The startled boy fell back, dropping his sword. The hairy monster turned to see who the woman was calling. The boy quickly picked up his sword and fled, ignoring the searing pain on his frostbitten foot as he ran. He was terrified at the thought that the man was chasing him. He could hear the man's heavy breathing. The boy leapt onto the goat trail and sped towards his village. He could still hear the heavy breathing. It was drawing closer every second. The boy suddenly swerved to his left, pivoted, and slashed back with his sword. There was nobody there. No sound of heavy breathing. The only sound was the haunting plea of a distraught woman. "Help! Please help!" The little boy looked back. That poor woman. "Go back! Help her!" cried his inner voice. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and fled towards his village. "No! Go back! Help her!" Shiva woke up sweating, his heart pounding madly. He instinctively turned around, wanting desperately to go back to that dreadful day, to redeem himself. But there would be no redemption. The woman's terrified face came flooding back. He shut his eyes. But how do you shut your eyes to an image branded on your mind? He pulled his knees up and rested his head on them. Then he did the only thing that helped. He cried. The Yagna platform had been set up at the central square of the Dvitiya platform. For Karachappa, it was not the usual austere affair typical of Meluha. The frontier city had decorated the area with bright colors that vied for attention. The platform itself had been painted in a bright golden hue. Colorfully decorated poles, festooned with flowers, held aloft a shamiana, a cloth canopy. Red and blue pennants, with the Suryavanshi symbol painted on, hung proudly from many poles. The entire atmosphere was that of pomp and show. Jhuleshwar received Shiva at the head of the platform and guided him to his ritual seat at the yagna. At the governor's repeated requests, Shiva had removed his cravat for the duration of the ceremony. Parvateshwar and Brihaspati sat to the right of the Neelkanth, while Jhuleshwar and Ayurvati sat to his left. Nandi and Veerbhadra had also been invited to sit behind Shiva. Though this was unorthodox, Jhuleshwar had acceded to the Neelkanth's request. Jhuleshwar governed a cosmopolitan border city and believed that many of the strict Meluhan laws could be bent slightly for the sake of expediency. His liberal attitude had made Karachappa a magnet for people from a wide variety of races and a hub for the exchange of goods, services, and ideas. Shiva looked towards Sati's balcony, which overlooked the central square in the distance. Though Sati was not allowed to step on the platform while the yagna was being conducted, she could look on at the proceedings from the safe distance of her chambers. Shiva noticed her standing behind the balcony curtain, with Kritika by her side, observing the proceedings. As was the custom before such a yagna, the Pandit stood up and asked formally, "If anyone here has an objection to this yagna, please speak now, or forever hold your peace." This was just a traditional question, which wasn't actually supposed to be answered. Hence, there was an audible collective groan, when a voice cried out loudly, "I object." Nobody needed to look to recognize where the voice came from. It was Tarak, an immigrant from the ultra-conservative northwest regions of the empire. Since Tarak had come to Karachappa, he had taken it upon himself to be the moral police of this decadent city of sin. Shiva strained his neck to see who had objections. He saw Tarak standing at the back, at the edge of the puja platform, very close to Sati's balcony. He was a giant of a man, with a fair face cut up brutally due to a lifetime of strife, an immense stomach, and a miner's bulging muscular arms. He cut an awesome figure. It was obvious, without even looking at his amulets, that Tarak was a Kshatriya who had made his living working in the lower rungs of the army. Juleshwar glared at Tarak in exasperation. "What is it now? This time we have ensured that we have not used the white Chandravanshi colors in our decorations? Or do you think the water being used for the ceremony is not at the correct temperature as per the Vedas?" The gathering sniggered. Parvateshwar looked at Juleshwar sharply. Before he could reprimand the governor for his cavalier reference to the Vedas, Tarak spoke up. "The law says no Vikarma should be allowed on the Yagna platform." "Yes," said Juleshwar, "and unless you have been declared a Vikarma, I don't think that law is being broken." "Yes, it is." There were shocked murmurs from the congregation. Juleshwar raised his hand. "Nobody is a Vikarma here, Tarak," said Juleshwar. "Now please, sit down." "Princess Sati defiled the Yagna with her presence." Shiva and Parvateshwar looked sharply at Tarak. Juleshwar was as stunned as the rest of the assembly by Tarak's statement. "Tarak," said Juleshwar, "you go too far. Princess Sati is confined in the guest house, abiding by the laws of the Yagna. She is not present on the Yagna platform. Now sit down before I have you whipped." "On what charge will you have me whipped, Governor?" yelled Tarak. "Standing up for the law is not a crime in Meluha." "But the law has not been broken." "Yes, it has. The exact words of the law is that no Vikarma can be on the same platform while a Yagna is being conducted. The Yagna is being conducted on the Dvitiya platform of the city. By being on the same platform, the princess defiles the Yagna." Tarak was technically correct. Most people interpreted that law to mean that a Vikarma could not be on the prayer ceremony platform. However, since Karachappa, like most Meluhan cities, was built on a platform, a strict interpretation of the law would mean that Sati should not be anywhere on the entire Dvitiya platform. To keep the Yagna legal, she would either have to move to the other platform of the city or outside the city walls. Juleshwar was momentarily taken aback, as Tarak's objection was accurate in principle. He tried a rally weakly. Come, Tarak, you're being too conscientious. I think that is too strict an interpretation. I think—" "No, Sri Juleshwarji," reverberated a loud voice through the gathering. Everybody turned to see where the sound came from. Sati, who had come out on a balcony, continued. "Please accept my apologies for interrupting you, Governor," said Sati with a formal namaste. "But Tarak's interpretation of the law is fair. I am terribly sorry to have disturbed the Yagna. My entourage and I shall leave the city immediately. We will return by the beginning of the third prahar, by which time the ceremony should be over." Shiva clenched his fist. He frantically wanted to wring Tarak's neck, but he controlled himself with superhuman effort. Within minutes, Sati was out of the guest house, along with Kritika and 5 personal bodyguards. Shiva turned to look at Nandi and Veerbhadra, both of whom rose to join Sati. They understood that Shiva wanted them to ensure that she was safe outside the city. "It is disgusting that you did not realize this yourself," Tarak said scornfully to Sati. "What kind of a princess are you? Don't you respect the law?" Sati looked at Tarak, her face calm. She refused to be drawn into a debate and waited patiently for her guards to prepare the horses. "I don't understand what a Vikarma woman is doing travelling with a convoy of the Neelkanth. She is polluting the entire journey," raged Tarak. "Enough!" intervened Shiva. "Princess Sati is leaving with dignity. Stop your diatribe right now." "I will not!" screeched Tarak. "What kind of a leader are you? You are challenging Lord Ram's laws." "Tarak!" yelled Juleshwar. "The Lord Neelkanth has the right to challenge the law. If you value your life, you will not defy his authority." "I am a Meluhan!" shrieked Tarak. "It is my right to challenge anyone breaking the law. A dhobi, a mere washerwoman, challenged Lord Ram. It was his greatness that he acceded to the man's objection and renounced his wife. I would urge the Neelkanth to learn from Lord Ram's example and use his brains for making decisions." "Enough, Tarak!" erupted Sati. The entire congregation was stunned into silence by Tarak's remark, but not Sati. Something inside her snapped. She had tolerated too many insults for too long, and she had endured them with quiet dignity. But this time the man had insulted Shiva, her Shiva, she finally acknowledged to herself. "I invoke the right of Agni Pariksha," said Sati, back in control. The stunned onlookers could not believe their eyes. A trial by fire! This was getting worse and worse. Under Agni Pariksha, an unfairly injured soul could challenge their tormentor to a duel. It was called Agni Pariksha as combat would take place within a ring of fire. There was no escape from the ring. The duelists had to keep fighting till one person surrendered or died. An Agni Pariksha was extremely rare these days, and for a woman to invoke the right was almost unheard of. "There is no reason for this, my lady," pleaded Juleshwar. Just like his subjects, he was terrified that Princess Sati might be killed in his city, for the gargantuan Tarak would certainly slay her. The emperor's wrath would be terrible. Turning to Tarak, Juleshwar ordered, "You will not accept this challenge." "And be called a coward?" "You want to prove your bravery," spoke Parvateshwar for the first time. "Then fight me. I will act as Sati's second for the challenge." "Only I have the right to appoint a second, Pitratulya," said Sati, reverentially referring to Parvateshwar as being like a father. Turning to Tarak, she said, "I am appointing no second. You will fight with me." "You will do no such thing, Tarak," Brahaspati objected this time. "Tarak, the only reason you wouldn't want to fight is if you are afraid of being killed," said Shiva. Every person turned towards Neelkanth, shocked by his words. Turning to Sati, Shiva continued, "Citizens of Karachappa, I have seen the princess fight. She can defeat anyone, even the gods." Sati stared at Shiva, shocked. "I accept the challenge," growled Tarak. Sati nodded at Tarak, climbed on a white steed, and turned to leave. At the edge of the square, she pulled up a horse and turned to take one more look at Shiva. She smiled at him, turned, and rode away. It was the beginning of the third Prahar as Shiva and Brahaspati stole quietly into the local Varjish Graha, the exercise hall, to observe Tarak exercising with two partners. The day's yagna had been a disaster. With everyone petrified that the princess would die the next day, no one was inclined to participate in the ceremony. However, as the yagna had been called, it had to be conducted, or the gods would be offended. The congregation went through the motions, and the yagna was called to a close. Tarak's famed fearsome blows on his hapless partners filled Brahaspati's soul with dread, and he came to an immediate decision. "I'll assassinate him tonight. She will not die tomorrow." Shiva turned in stunned disbelief to the chief scientist. "Brahaspati, what are you saying?" "Sati is too noble to meet a fate such as this. I am willing to sacrifice my life and reputation for her." "But you are a Brahmin. You're not supposed to kill." "I'll do it for you," whispered Brahaspati, emotions clouding his judgment. "You will not lose her, my friend." Shiva came close to Brahaspati and hugged him. "Don't corrupt your soul, my friend. I am not worth such a big sacrifice." Brahaspati clung to Shiva. Stepping back, Shiva whispered, "In any case, your sacrifice is not required, for as sure as the sun rises in the east, Sati will defeat Tarak tomorrow." A few hours into the third Prahar, Sati returned to the guest house. She did not go up to her room, but summoned Nandi and Veerbhadra to the central courtyard, drew her sword, and began her practice with them. A little later, Parvateshwar walked in, looking broken. His expression clearly conveyed his fear that this might be the last time he would talk to Sati. She stopped practicing, sheathed her sword, and folded her hands into a respectful namaste. "Pitratulya," she whispered. Parvateshwar came close to Sati, his face distraught. She could not be sure, but it seemed as though he had been crying. She had never seen even a hint of a tear in his confident eyes. "My child," mumbled Parvateshwar. "I am doing what I think is right," said Sati. "I am happy." Parvateshwar couldn't find the strength to say anything. For a brief moment, he considered assassinating Tarak at night, but that would be illegal. Just then, Shiva and Brahaspati walked in. Shiva noticed Parvateshwar's face. This was the first time he had seen any sign of weakness in the general. While he could understand Parvateshwar's predicament, he did not like the effect it was having on Sati. "I'm sorry I'm late," said Shiva cheerily. Everyone turned to look at him. "Actually, Brahaspati and I had gone to the Lord Varun temple to pray for Tarak," said Shiva. We prayed that the journey his soul would take to the other world would be comfortable. Sati burst out laughing. So did the rest of the party in the courtyard. Bhadra, you're not the right opponent for the practice, said Shiva. You move too fast. Nandi, you duel with the princess and control your agility. Turning to Sati, Shiva continued. I saw Tarak practice. His blows have tremendous power, but the force of the blows slow him down. Turn his strength into his weakness. Use your agility against his movements. Sati nodded, absorbing every word. She resumed her practice with Nandi. Moving rapidly compared to Nandi's slower movements, Sati was able to succeed in a strike that could be kill. Suddenly, an idea struck Shiva. Instructing Nandi to stop, he asked Sati, Are you allowed to choose the combat weapon? Yes, it's my prerogative as I threw the challenge. Then choose the knife. It will reduce the reach of his strikes while you can move in and out much quicker. That's brilliant, concurred Parvateshwar, while Brahaspati nodded. Sati signalled her agreement immediately. Almost at the same instant, Veerbhadra emerged with 2 knives. Giving one to Nandi, he gave the other to Sati. Practice, my lady. Sati and Tarak stood at the centre of a circular stadium. This was not the main Rangbhumi of Karachappa, which was gargantuan in its proportions. This one had been constructed next to the main stadium for music concerts that the Mesopotamian immigrants in Karachappa loved. The arena was of the exact dimensions required for an Agni Pariksha, not so big that a person could simply steer clear of the other contestant, and not too small so that the combat would end fast. There were stands around the ground, and a capacity crowd of over 20,000 had come to watch the most important duel in Karachappa for the last 500 years. There was a prayer on every lip. Let Father Manu cause a miracle so that Princess Sati would win, or at the very least, live. Both Tarak and Sati greeted each other with a namaste, repeating an ancient pledge to fight with honor. Then, turning to the statue of Lord Varun at the top of the main stand, they bowed, asking for blessings from the god of the water and the seas. Juleshwar had vacated his ceremonial seat right below the statue of Lord Varun for Shiva. The governor sat to Shiva's left, with Ayurvati and Kritika to his left. Brahaspati and Parvateshwar sat to Shiva's right. Nandi and Veerbhadra were in their now familiar position behind Shiva. A bird courier had been sent to Daksha the previous day, informing him of the duel. However, there wasn't enough time to expect a reply. At long last, Juleshwar stood up. He was nervous about the Agni Pariksha, but appeared composed. As per custom, he raised a bald fist to his heart and boomed, Satya, Dharma, Man, an invocation to truth, duty, honor. The rest of the stadium rang in agreement. Satya, Dharma, Man. Tarak and Sati echoed, Satya, Dharma, Man. Juleshwar nodded to the stadium keeper, who lit the ceremonial oil lamp with the holy fire. The lamp spilled its fire onto the oil channel. The periphery of the central ground was aflame. The ring for the pariksha had been set. Juleshwar turned to Shiva. My lord, your instructions to start the duel. Shiva looked at Sati with a confident smile. Then turning to the stadium, he declared loudly, In the purifying fire of Lord Agni, truth will always triumph. Tarak and Sati immediately drew their knives. Tarak held his knife in front of him like most traditional fighters. He had chosen a strategy that played to his strengths. Keeping his knife in front of him allowed him to strike the moment Sati came close. He did not stir too much, allowing Sati to make her moves in front of him. Sati, breaking all known rules of combat, held her knife behind her. She shifted the knife continuously from one hand to the other while keeping a safe distance from her opponent. The aim was to confuse Tarak about the direction of her attack. Tarak, on the other hand, was watching Sati's movements like a hawk. He saw her right arm flex. The knife was now in her right hand. Suddenly Sati leapt to the left. Tarak remained stationary. He knew that with her right hand holding the knife, the leftward movement was a feint. She would have to move to the right to bring her knife into play. Sure enough, Sati quickly moved to the right and brought in her arm up in a stabbing motion. Tarak was prepared. Shifting his knife quickly to his left arm, he slashed viciously, cutting Sati across her torso. It wasn't a deep cut, but it appeared to hurt. A collective gasp went out of the audience. Sati retreated and rallied. She moved the knife to her back again, transferring it from one hand to the other. Tarak kept a close eye on her arms, The knife was in her left hand. He expected her to move to the right, which she did. He remained immobile, waiting for her to swerve suddenly to her left. She did, swinging her left arm as she moved. Tarak acted before her arm could even come close enough to do any damage. He swung ferociously with his right arm and cut her deep in the left shoulder. Sati retreated rapidly as the congregation moaned in horror. Some shut their eyes. They could not bear to look any more. Most were praying fervently. If it had to be done, let it be done swiftly and not in a slow, painful manner. "What is she doing?" whispered a panic-stricken Brihaspati to Shiva. "Why is she charging in so recklessly?" Shiva turned to look at Brihaspati, also noticing Parvateshwar's face. Parvateshwar had a surprised yet admiring grin on his face. Unlike Brihaspati, he knew what was going on. Turning back to look at the duel, Shiva whispered, "She is laying a trap." At the center, Sati was still transferring the knife between her hands behind her back. She feigned a move from her right to the left, but this time did not transfer the knife. She flexed her left arm, keeping the right arm holding the knife loose and relaxed. Tarak was watching Sati closely, confident that he was going to slowly bleed her to death. He believed the knife was in her left hand. He waited for her to move right, then left, which she did in a swift veer. Expecting her left arm to come in, he sliced with his right hand. Sati neatly pirouetted back. Before a surprised Tarak could react, she had leapt to her right and brought her right hand in brutally onto Tarak's chest. The knife pierced Tarak's lung. The shock of the blow immobilized Tarak. Blood spurted from his mouth. He dropped his knife and staggered back. Sati ruthlessly maintained the pressure and dug the knife in deeper, right up to the hilt. Tarak stumbled back and collapsed to the ground, motionless. The entire stadium was stunned. Sati's face had the expression of the mother goddess in fury. 85 years of repressed anger had surfaced in that instant. She pulled the knife out, slowly twisting it to inflict maximum damage. Blood spewed out from Tarak's mouth at an alarming rate. She raised the knife with both her hands. All she had to do was bring it down on his heart, and Tarak would meet his maker. Then suddenly, her expression became calm again. It was almost as if someone had sucked out all the negative energy inside her. She turned around. Shiva, the destroyer of evil, sat on his throne staring at her with a slight smile. Then she looked at Tarak and whispered, "I forgive you." The stadium erupted in joy. Even if Lord Varun had himself scripted the fight, it wouldn't have been as perfect. It had everything that the Surya Vanshis held dear, defiant when under pressure, yet magnanimous in victory. Sati raised her knife and shouted, "Jai Shri Ram!" The entire stadium repeated, "Jai Shri Ram!" Sati turned towards Shiva and roared once again, "Jai Shri Ram! Jai—" Shiva's words were clogged by the knot in his throat. "The Lord won't mind this time if I don't complete the cry." Shiva glanced away from Sati, lest he show his tears to the woman he loved. Regaining control of himself, he looked back at her with a radiant smile. Sati continued to stare at Shiva. Emotions that had been dormant in her for too long rippled through her being as she saw Shiva's admiration. When she couldn't bear it any longer, she shut her eyes. Chapter 16. The Sun and Earth. There was an impromptu celebration that night in Karachappa. Their princess was safe. The insufferable Tarak had been defeated. Many people in Karachappa believed that even his own mother must have loathed the surly preacher. He had few supporters in the liberal city, but there were rules for duels. Hence, the moment Sati had forgiven Tarak, paramedics had rushed in to take him to the hospital. Surgeons had labored for 6 hours to save his life. To much dismay for the townfolk, they had succeeded. "Have you heard about the poem of the sun and the earth?" Sati asked Shiva. They were standing on the balcony of the governor's palace, while a boisterous party raged inside. "No," said Shiva with a seductive grin, coming a little closer to her, "but I'd love to hear it." "Apparently, the earth sometimes thinks of the possibility of coming closer to the sun," said Sati. "But she can't do that. She is so base and his brilliance so searing that she will cause destruction if she draws him closer." "What now?" "I disagree," said Shiva. "I think the sun burns only as long as the earth is close to him. If the earth wasn't there, there would be no reason for the sun to exist." "The sun doesn't exist just for the earth. It exists for every single planet in the solar system." "Isn't it really the sun's choice for whom he chooses to exist?" "No, said Sati, looking at Shiva melancholic. The moment he became the sun, his calling became higher. He does not exist for himself. He exists for the greater good of everyone. His luminosity is the lifeblood of the solar system, and if the earth has any sense of responsibility, she will not do anything to destroy this balance. So what should the sun do? Asked Shiva, his hurt and anger showing on his face. Just waste his entire life burning away, looking at the earth from a distance? The earth isn't going away anywhere. The sun and the earth can still share a warm friendship, but anything more is against the laws. It is against the interests of others. Shiva turned away from Sati in anger. He looked north to seek solace from his holy lake. Feeling nothing, he looked up at the skies, towards the gods he did not believe in. Damn it! He banged the balcony railing with his powerful fist, dislodging some bricks, and stormed off. Outside the city walls, in a forested area, a few soldiers lay in wait. At a slight distance, 2 hooded figures were seated on large rocks. The captain of the platoon of soldiers stood rigid in attention next to the duo. He could not believe that he was standing next to the queen herself. The privilege overwhelmed him. One of the hooded figures raised his hand to motion for the captain to step closer. On the hooded figure's wrist was a leather bracelet with a serpent Om. "Vishwadyum, are you sure this is where we are supposed to meet him? He is late by nearly an hour." "Yes, my lord," replied Vishwadyum nervously. This is exactly where he had said he would come. The other hooded figure turned and spoke in a commanding voice, a feminine one, a voice used to being obeyed without question. "That man makes the queen of the Nagas wait." Turning to the other hooded figure, she continued, "I trust you have worked this out in detail. I hope I haven't entered this vile territory in vain." The other hooded figure moved his fleshy hands in a motion asking the queen for patience. "Have faith, your highness. This man is our key to giving the Suryavanshis a blow that they will never recover from." "Apparently, there was an Agni Pariksha fight between the princess and a man in the city yesterday," said Vishwadyum suddenly, trying to impress the queen with his sharp ear for local knowledge. "I do not have the exact details. I just hope that our man was not involved in it." The queen turned swiftly to the other hooded figure, then back to Vishwadyum. "Please wait with the other soldiers." Vishwadyum sensed he had said something he shouldn't have, and quickly retreated before his lord's stern gaze could reprimand him. This is why he had been told in training school that a good soldier never speaks unless spoken to. "She's here?" asked the queen with barely suppressed anger. The other hooded figure nodded. "I thought I told you to forget about this," said the queen sternly. "There is nothing to be gained by this quest. Do you realize your stupid attack on Mount Mandar may have left them suspect that we have a mole in their midst?" The male figure looked up in apology. "Did you come here for her?" "No, your highness," said the hooded figure with a deeply respectful tone. "This was the place where he asked us to meet him." The queen reached out her hand and gently patted the man's shoulder. "Stay focused, my child," said the queen softly. "If we pull this off, it will be our biggest victory ever. Like you just said, we will strike a blow that they will find very difficult to recover from." The man nodded. "And yet," continued the queen, pulling her hand back into the shelter of her black robes, "your preoccupation with her makes you take uncharacteristic decisions. Do you know he has sent a clear message that she cannot be touched? Otherwise, the deal is off." The hooded figure stared at the queen in surprise. "How did you—" "I am queen of the Nagas, my child," she interrupted. "I have more than one piece on the chessboard." The hooded figure continued to look at the queen, ashamed about his poor call at Mount Mandar. The queen's next words added to his shame. "You are making surprising mistakes, my child. You have the potential to be the greatest Naga ever. Don't waste it." "Yes, your highness." The queen appeared to relax. "I think, when we are alone now," said the queen, "maybe you can refer to me as Mossy. After all, I am your mother's sister." "Of course you are," said the hooded figure as a smile reached his eyes. "Whatever you say, Mossy." It had been 2 weeks since the Agni Pariksha. Sati had recovered sufficiently for the convoy to continue its journey to its next destination. Shiva, Parvateshwar and Brahaspati sat together in Shiva's chambers at the guest house. "It is agreed then," said Parvateshwar. "I will make the arrangements for us to commence our journey a week from today. By that time, Sati should have recovered completely." "Yes, I think that is a suitable plan," agreed Shiva. "Parvateshwar, I will not be coming along any further," said Brahaspati. "Why?" asked Parvateshwar. Well, the new chemicals I had ordered have come. I was considering going back with the consignment to Mount Mandar, so that the experiments can begin as soon as possible. If we can get this right, the consumption of water for making the somras will reduce drastically. Shiva smiled sadly. I'm going to miss you, my friend. And I you, said Brahaspati. But I'm not leaving the country. When you finish your tour, come to Mount Mandar. I'll show you around the sylvan forests near our facility. Yes, said Shiva with a grin. Perhaps you will reveal some of your scientific skills and discover a plausible cause for the blue throat. Both Shiva and Brahaspati burst out laughing. Parvateshwar, who did not understand the private joke, looked on politely. Just one point, Brahaspati, said Parvateshwar. I will not be able to divert any soldiers from the royal entourage. I will speak to Governor Jhuleshwar to send some soldiers for your return journey. Thank you, Parvateshwar, but I'm sure I'll be fine. Why should a terrorist be interested in me? There was another terrorist attack yesterday in a village some 50 kilometers from Mohenjo-daro, said Parvateshwar. The entire temple was destroyed and all the Brahmins killed. Another one, said Shiva angered. That is the third attack this month. Yes, said Parvateshwar. They are getting bolder. And as usual, they escaped before any backup could arrive to give them a real fight. Shiva clenched his fists. He had no idea on how to counter the terror attacks. There was no way to prepare for them, since nobody knew where they would strike next. Was attacking Swadweep, the Chandravanshi's own country, the only way to stop this? Brahaspati kept quiet, sensing Shiva's inner turmoil. He knew there were no easy answers. Looking at Shiva, Parvateshwar continued. I will also get my people to make preparations for our journey. I'll meet you in the evening for dinner. I think Sati can finally join us. I will send instructions for Nandi and Veerbhadra to join us. I know you like their company. Shiva looked startled at Parvateshwar's uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. Thank you, Parvateshwar. This is very kind of you. But I believe Kritika, Nandi and Veerbhadra are going to a flute recital tonight. That crazy Veerbhadra has even bought some jewels so that he won't look like a country bumpkin next to Nandi. Parvateshwar smiled politely. But it will be a pleasure to dine with you, said Shiva. Thank you, said Parvateshwar as he got up. After a few steps he stopped and turned around. Overcoming his hesitation, he mumbled, Shiva. Yes, Shiva got up. I don't think I ever told you this, said Parvateshwar, uncomfortable. But I would like to thank you for helping Sati in her Agni Pariksha. It was your clear thinking which led to victory. No, said Shiva. It was her brilliance. Of course it was, said Parvateshwar. But you gave her the confidence and strategy to show her brilliance. If there is any person in the world that I look at with a feeling beyond a sense of duty, it is Sati. I thank you for helping her. You're welcome, smiled Shiva, with a sense not to embarrass Parvateshwar further by lengthening this conversation. Parvateshwar smiled and folded his hands into a namaste. While he had still not fallen prey to the countrywide Neelkanth fever, he was beginning to respect Shiva. Earning Parvateshwar's esteem was a long journey that Shiva had only begun. The general turned around and walked out of the room. He's not a bad sort, said Brahaspati, looking at Parvateshwar's retreating back. He may be a little surly, but he is one of the most honest Suryavanshis I have ever met, a true follower of Lord Ram. I hope you don't get too upset by the ill-tempered things he says to you. I don't, said Shiva. In fact, I think very highly of Parvateshwar. He is one man whose respect I would certainly like to earn. Brahaspati smiled, seeing yet another instance of Shiva's large heart. He leaned closer and said, You are a good man. Shiva smiled back. I had not answered you the last time you had asked me, Shiva, continued Brahaspati. Honestly, I have never believed in the legend of the Neelkanth. I still don't. Shiva's smile became a little broader. But I believe in you. If there is one person capable of sucking the negative energy out of this land, I think it will be you. And I will do all I can to help you, in whatever way I can. You are the brother I never had, Brahaspati. Just your presence is all the help I need. Saying so, Shiva embraced his friend. Brahaspati hugged Shiva back warmly, feeling a sense of renewed energy course through him. He swore once again that he would never back off from his mission, no matter what. It wasn't just for Meluha, it was also for Shiva, his friend. It was over 3 weeks after Sati's Agni Pariksha that the convoy set off from Karachappa. The usual 7 carriages travelled in a row. This time, not 5, but 6 carriages were dummies. Shiva sat with Sati in the third, and they had been joined by Parvateshwar and Ayurvati as well. It was the first time that Parvateshwar was travelling in the same carriage as Shiva. Kritika had begged off the carriage and volunteered to ride, claiming that she was missing the scenic beauty of the countryside. Veerbhadra was more than pleased to ride along with her in Nandi's platoon. They had journeyed just a few days away from Karachappa when the convoy was brought to a halt by a large caravan travelling hurriedly in the opposite direction. Parvateshwar stepped out of his carriage to inquire. Brigadier Vraka came up to Parvateshwar and executed a military salute. "What is the matter?" "My lord, they are refugees from the village of Kunj," said Vraka. "They are escaping a terrorist attack." "Escaping?" asked a surprised Parvateshwar. "You mean the attack is still on?" "I think so, my lord," said Vraka, his face filled with rage. "God damn it," swore Parvateshwar. Neither Meluha nor he had ever got an opportunity like this, to be present at the right time and right place with 1,500 soldiers while a terrorist attack was in progress. And yet, Parvateshwar's hands were tied. He was not allowed to take on any mission except to protect the Neelkanth and the princess. "What nonsense," he thought to himself. "My orders forbid me from following my Kshatriya dharma." "What's the matter, Parvateshwar?" Parvateshwar turned to find Shiva right behind him. Sati and Ayurvati were getting out of the carriage as well. Before Parvateshwar could answer, a horrible noise tore through the quiet forest road. It was a sound Shiva had come to recognize. It declared the evil intentions of the conch shell bearer loud and clear. It announced that an attack had begun. A Naga attack had begun. Chapter 17. The Battle of Kunj. "Where are they?" asked Parvateshwar. "They are in my village, my lord," said the scared village headman. "It's a short distance from here. Some 500 Chandravanshi soldiers led by 5 Nagas. They gave us 30 minutes to leave, but the Brahmins at the temple were detained." Parvateshwar clenched his fists to regain his control despite his fury. "Our Panditji is a good man, my lord," said the village headman. Tears spilled out of his eyes. Vraka put a comforting hand on the headman's shoulders, but the gesture only made the headman more miserable. Not knowing the fate of the village priest added to his guilt. "We wanted to stay and fight alongside our Pandit and the other Brahmins," sobbed the headman. "They are men of God. They don't even know how to raise a weapon. How can they fight against this horde?" Vraka let go of the headman as anger got the better of him. "But Panditji ordered us to leave. He told us to flee with our women and children. He said he would face whatever Lord Brahma had written in his fate. But if anyone can be saved, they should be." Parvateshwar's nails dug into his skin. He was livid at the cowardly Chandravanshis for yet again attacking defenseless Brahmins and not Kshatriyas who could retaliate. He was incensed at his fate for having put him in a position where he could not take action. A part of him wanted to ignore his orders, but he was bound not to break the law. "This nonsense has to stop!" Parvateshwar looked up to see which voice had echoed his thoughts. The expression on Shiva's face almost threw him back for a moment. The intense fury visible in the Neelkanth would have brought even a Deva to a standstill. "We are good people," raged Shiva. "We are not scared chicken who should turn and flee. Those terrorists should be on the run. They should be the ones feeling the wrath of the Suryavanshis." A villager standing behind the headman said, "But they are terrorists. We cannot defeat them. The Panditji knew that. That is why he ordered us to run." "But we have 1,500 soldiers," said Shiva, irritated at the display of such cowardice, "and another 500 of you. We outnumber them 4 to 1. We can crush them. Teach them a lesson they will remember." The headman argued, "But they have Nagas. They are supernatural, bloodthirsty killers. What chance do we have against such evil?" Shiva had the presence of mind to realize that superstition can only be countered by another stronger belief. He climbed the carriage pedestal to stand tall. The villagers stared at him. He ripped off his cravat and threw it away. He didn't need it anymore. "I am the Neelkanth!" All the soldiers looked up at the destroyer of evil, mesmerized. They were overjoyed to see him truly accept his destiny. The villagers who did not know of the Neelkanth's arrival were stunned at seeing the legend come alive right before their eyes. "I am going to fight these terrorists!" roared Shiva. "I am going to show them that we are not scared anymore. I am going to make them feel the pain we feel. I am going to let them know that Meluha is not going to roll over and let them do what they want." Pure energy coursed through the huddled mass that stood in front of Shiva, straightening their spines and inspiring their souls. "Who's coming with me?" "I am," bellowed Parvateshwar, feeling the suffocating restraints imposed on him fall away by Shiva's pronouncement. "I am!" echoed Sati, Nandi, Veerbhadra and Vraka. "I am!" echoed every single soul standing there. Suddenly, the scared villagers and soldiers were turned into a righteous army. The soldiers drew their swords. The villagers grabbed whatever weapons they could from the traveling armory. "To Kunj!" yelled Shiva, mounting a horse and galloping ahead. Parvateshwar and Sati quickly unharnessed the horses from the cart and raced behind Shiva. The Suryavanshis charged behind them, letting out a cry louder than any Naga conch shell. As they stormed into Kunj, the horror of what had transpired hit them. The Chandravanshis had ignored the rest of the village and concentrated on the area that would distress the Meluhans most, their venerated temple. Decapitated bodies of the Brahmins lay around the shrine. They had been clumped together and executed. The temple itself was ruthlessly destroyed and aflame. The sight of the gruesome attack enraged the Suryavanshis even more. They charged like crazed bulls. The Chandravanshis had no chance. They were completely outnumbered and overwhelmed. They lost ground quickly. Some of the Chandravanshis were beginning to retreat when the 5 Nagas rallied them back. They fought on against the crushing odds, clashing against the righteous Suryavanshis with unexpected courage. Parvateshwar fought like a man possessed. Shiva, who had never seen the general battle, was awed by his skill and valor. Like Shiva, Parvateshwar knew that the key to victory were the Nagas. As long as they were alive, the Suryavanshis would feel terrified and the Chandravanshis would draw inspiration from them. He attacked one of them with frenzied aggression. The Naga skillfully parried Parvateshwar's attack with his shield. Bringing his sword down, he tried to strike Parvateshwar's exposed shoulder. What he didn't know was that Parvateshwar had deliberately left his flank exposed. Swinging to the side to avoid the blow, Parvateshwar let his shield clap onto his back as he swiftly drew a knife held in a clip behind. He hurled it at the Naga's exposed right shoulder. His cry let Parvateshwar know that the knife had penetrated deep. The Naga roared in fury. But to Parvateshwar's surprised admiration, he swung his sword arm with a knife buried in his shoulder back into the battle. Parvateshwar brought his shield back up and blocked the slightly weaker strike from the Naga. He brought his sword up in a stab, but the Naga was too quick and deflected it. Swerving left, Parvateshwar rammed his shield down hard on the knife still buried in the Naga's shoulder. The knife chipped through the shoulder bone. The Naga snarled in pain and stumbled. That was the opening that Parvateshwar needed. Bringing his sword up in a brutal upward stab, he pushed it ruthlessly through the Naga's heart. The Naga froze as Parvateshwar's sword ripped the life out of him. Parvateshwar pushed his sword in deeper, completing the kill. The Naga fell back motionless. Parvateshwar was not above the Meluhan fascination with the Naga face. He kneeled to tear the Naga's mask off to reveal a horrifying countenance. The Naga's nose was pure bone and had grown to almost form a bird-like beak. His ears were ridiculously large, while his mouth was grotesquely constricted. He looked like a vulture in human form. Parvateshwar quickly whispered what every Suryavanshi said when he brought down a worthy opponent. "Have a safe journey to the other side, brave warrior." 1 down, 4 to go, thought Parvateshwar, rising. Correction, 2 down, 3 to go. He saw Shiva bringing down a gigantic Naga in the distance. Both Shiva and Parvateshwar saw each other and nodded. Shiva pointed towards Parvateshwar's back. Parvateshwar turned to see a ferocious Naga fighting 5 Suryavanshis single-handedly. He turned back to look at Shiva and nodded. Shiva turned to charge at another Naga as Parvateshwar turned to the one marked for him. Shiva dashed through the pitched battle scene towards a Naga who had just killed a Suryavanshi soldier. He leapt high as he ran in close, with his shield in front to prevent the standard swinging strike from the Naga. The Naga had brought his own shield up to prevent what he expected from Shiva, the orthodox up-to-down swinging strike from a good height. Shiva, however, surprised the Naga by thrusting in his sword sideward, neatly circumventing the Naga's shield and gashing his arm. The Naga bellowed in pain and fell back. He straightened and held his shield high again, realizing that Shiva was going to be a much more formidable enemy than the previous Suryavanshi. As Shiva grimly fought the fearless Naga, he did not notice another one at a distance. This Naga could see that their assault was being progressively pushed back. It was a matter of time before the Nagas and the Chandravanshis would have to retreat. This Naga would have to face the ignominy of having led the first failed attack. And he could see that it was Shiva who had led the counter-offensive. That man had to be destroyed for the future of the mission. The Naga drew his bow forward. Shiva, meanwhile, unaware of the danger, had wedged his sword a little into the Naga's stomach. The Naga grimly fought on, stepping back slowly while ramming Shiva with his shield. He tried in vain to swing his sword down to slice Shiva, who kept his own shield at the ready. He kept fending the Naga's blows while pressing ahead, pushing the sword in deeper and deeper. It was a few more seconds before the Naga's soul gave up. It slipped away as his body bled to death and collapsed. Shiva looked down at the fallen Naga in awe. These people may be evil, but they are fearless soldiers. Shiva looked to the left to find that Parvateshwar too had killed the Naga he had engaged. He continued to turn slowly, trying to find the last Naga. Then he heard a loud shout from the person he had come to love beyond reason. Shiva! Shiva turned to his right to find Sati racing towards him. He looked behind her to see if anyone was chasing her. There was nobody. He frowned. Before he could react, Sati leapt forward, a jump timed to perfection. The Naga at the distance had released the Agniban, or the fire arrow, one of the legendary poisoned arrows of their people. The venom on its tip burned its victim's body from the inside, causing a slow, painful death that would scar the soul for many births. The arrow had been set straight at Shiva's neck. It sped unerringly on its deadly mission. However, the Naga had not calculated the possibility of someone obstructing its path. Sati twisted her body in midair as she leapt in front of Shiva. The arrow slammed into her chest with brutal force, propelling her airborne body backwards. She fell to Shiva's left, limp and motionless. A stunned Shiva stared at Sati's prone body, his heart shattering. The destroyer of evil roared in fury. He charged at the Naga like a wild elephant on the brink of insanity, his sword raised. The Naga was momentarily staggered by the fearsome sight of the charging Neelkanth, but to his credit, he rallied. He swiftly drew another arrow from his quiver, loaded it and let it fly. Shiva swung his sword to deflect the arrow, barely missing a step or decreasing his manic speed. The increasingly panic-struck Naga loaded another arrow and shot again. Shiva swung his sword once more, deflecting the arrow easily, picking up more speed. The Naga reached back to draw another arrow, but it was too late. With a fierce yell, Shiva leapt high as he neared the Naga. He swung his sword viciously, decapitating the Naga with one swing of his sword. The Naga's lifeless body fell in a heap as his severed head flew with a mighty blow, while his still pumping heart spewed blood through the gaping neck. The Neelkanth's vengeance was not quenched. Screaming, Shiva bent and kept hacking at the Naga's inert body, ruthlessly slashing it to bits. No assertion of reason, no articulation of sanity could have penetrated Shiva's enraged mind, except for a soft, muffled, injured voice that was barely audible in the din of battle except to him. Shiva. He turned back to look at Sati lying in the distance, her head raised slightly. Sati! He sped towards her, bellowing, Parvateshwar, get Ayurvati! Sati has fallen! Ayurvati had already seen Sati's injured body. The Chandravanshis were retreating in haste. Ayurvati ran towards Sati, as did Parvateshwar on hearing Shiva's call. Shiva reached her first. She was motionless, but alive. She was breathing heavily, as the arrow had pierced her left lung, flooding her innards with the blood. She couldn't speak as the force of the blow had made the blood gush from her mouth. But she continued to stare at Shiva. Her face had a strange smile, almost serene. She kept opening her mouth as if trying to say something. Shiva desperately wanted to hold her, but he kept his hands locked together as he tried frantically to control his tears. "Oh Lord Brahma!" cried Ayurvati as she reached Sati and recognized the arrow. "Mastrak! Dhruvini! Get a stretcher, now!" Parvateshwar, Ayurvati, Mastrak and Dhruvini carried Sati to one of the village houses, with Shiva following closely. Ayurvati's other assistants had already begun cleaning the hut and setting the instruments for the surgery. "Wait outside, my lord," said Ayurvati to Shiva, raising a hand. Shiva wanted to follow Ayurvati into the hut, but Parvateshwar held him back, touching his shoulder. "Ayurvati is one of the best doctors in the world, Shiva. Let her do her job." Shiva turned to look at Parvateshwar, who was doing an admirable job of controlling his emotions. But it took one look in his eyes for Shiva to know that Parvateshwar was as afraid for Sati as he was, probably more than he had been before Sati's Agni Pariksha. Suddenly, a thought hit Shiva. He turned and hurried to the closest Naga body. Bending quickly, he checked the right wrist. Finding nothing there, he turned and rushed to the other Naga dead body. Meanwhile, Parvateshwar had rallied his disturbed mind enough to realize the important tasks that needed to be done. He called Vraka and ordered, "Place guards over the prisoners of war. Get doctors to attend to all the injured, including the Chandravanshis." "The injured Chandravanshis have already taken their poison, my lord," said Vraka. "You know they will never want to be caught alive." Parvateshwar looked at Vraka with a withering look, clearly saying he wasn't interested in the details and Vraka should get to the task at hand. "Yes, my lord," said Vraka, acknowledging Parvateshwar's silent order. "Arrange a perimeter for any counter-attack," continued Parvateshwar, his consciousness already drawn back to Sati's condition in the house behind him. "And—" Vraka looked up at Parvateshwar, surprised by his lord's hesitation. He had never seen his lord hesitate before. But Vraka had the good sense not to say anything. He waited for his lord to complete his statement. "And," continued Parvateshwar, "there should be some courier pigeons still alive in the temple. Send a red-coloured letter to Devagiri, to the emperor. Tell him, Princess Sati is seriously injured." Vraka looked up in disbelief. He had no news about Sati, but wisely he did not say anything. "Tell the emperor," continued Parvateshwar, "that she has been shot by an Agniban." "Oh, Lord Indra!" blurted Vraka, unable to control his shocked dismay. "Do it now, Brigadier," snarled Parvateshwar. "Yes, my lord," said Vraka with a weak salute. Shiva, meanwhile, had already checked the wrists of 4 of the Nagas. None of them wore the leather bracelet with the serpent arm that Shiva had come to recognize. He reached the last one, the one who had shot Sati, the wretched one who Shiva had hacked. Shiva kicked the Naga's torso with intense hatred before trying to find his right arm. It took him some time to find the severed limb. Locating it, he raised the remnants of the robe to check the wrist. There was no leather bracelet. It wasn't him. Shiva came back to the hut to find Parvateshwar seated on a stool outside. Kritika was standing beside the hut entrance, sobbing uncontrollably. Veerbhadra was holding her gently, comforting her. A distraught Nandi stood at Veerbhadra's side, his face stunned into a blank expression. Parvateshwar looked up at Shiva and pointed to the empty stool next to him with a weak smile. He was making brave attempts to appear under control. Shiva sat down slowly and looked into the distance, waiting for Ayurvati to come out. "We have removed the arrow, my lord," said Ayurvati. Shiva and Parvateshwar were standing in the hut, looking at an unconscious Sati. Nobody else was allowed in. Ayurvati had clearly said that Sati did not need the risk of increased infection, and nobody dared argue with the formidable Ayurvati on medical matters. Mastrak and Dhruvini had already fanned out to support the other medical officers treating the injured Suryavanshi soldiers. Shiva turned to the right of the bed to see the bloodied tongue that had been used to stretch Sati's innards to pull the arrow out. That tongue would never be used again. It had been infected with the Agniban poison. No amount of heat or chemicals would make the instrument sterile and safe again. Next to the tongue lay the offending arrow, wrapped in neem leaves, where it would stay for 1 full day before being buried deep in a dry grave to ensure it would not cause any more harm. Shiva looked at Ayurvati, his eyes moist, unable to find the strength to ask the question that raged in his heart. "I will not lie to you, my lord," said Ayurvati in the detached manner that doctors will themselves into to find the strength in traumatic circumstances. "It doesn't look good. Nobody in history has survived an Agniban which has penetrated one of the vital organs. The poison will start causing an intense fever in some time, which will result in the failing of one organ after another." Shiva looked down at Sati and then up pleadingly. Ayurvati fought hard to rein in her tears and keep her composure. She couldn't afford to lose control. She had many lives to save in the next few hours. "I'm sorry, my lord," said Ayurvati, "but there really is no cure. We can only give some medicines to make her end easier." Shiva glared angrily at Ayurvati. "We are not giving up. Is that clear?" Ayurvati looked at the ground, unable to meet Shiva's eye. "If the fever is kept under control, then her organs will not be damaged, right?" asked Shiva, as a glimmer of hope entered his being. Ayurvati looked up and said, "Yes, my lord, but that is not a final solution. The fever caused by an Agniban can only be delayed, not broken. If we try and control the fever, it will come back even stronger once the medicines are stopped." "Then we will control the fever forever," cried Shiva. "I will sit by her side all my life if needed. The fever will not rise." Ayurvati was about to say something to Shiva, but thought better of it and kept silent. She would come back to Shiva in a few hours. She knew that Sati could not be saved. It was impossible. Precious time was being wasted in this futile discussion, time that could be used to save other lives. "All right, my lord," said Ayurvati, quickly administering the medicines to Sati to keep her fever down. This should keep her fever down for a few hours. She looked up at Parvateshwar standing at the back for an instant. Parvateshwar knew that keeping the fever down would only lengthen Sati's agony. But he too felt the glimmer of hope that Shiva felt. Turning back towards Shiva, Ayurvati said, "My lord, you too are injured. Let me dress your wounds and I'll leave." "I'm all right," said Shiva, not taking his eyes off Sati for an instant. "No, you are not, my lord," said Ayurvati firmly. "Your wounds are deep. If they catch an infection, then it could be life-threatening." Shiva did not answer. He just kept looking at Sati and waved his hand dismissively. "Shiva!" shouted Ayurvati. Shiva looked up at her. "You cannot help Sati if you yourself become unwell." The harsh tone had the desired effect. While Shiva did not move from his place, he let Ayurvati dress his wounds. Ayurvati then quickly tended to Parvateshwar's wounds and left the hut. Shiva looked at the prahar lamp in the hut. It had been 3 hours since Ayurvati had removed the arrow. Parvateshwar had left the hut to look after the other injured and make the preparations for setting up camp, since the convoy was going to stay in Kunj for some time. That was Parvateshwar's way. If he was confronted with an ugly situation that he could do nothing about, he did not wallow in his misery. He would drown himself in his work so that he did not have to think about the crisis. Shiva was different. Many years back, he had sworn that he would never run from a difficult situation, even if there was absolutely nothing he could do. He hadn't left Sati's side for a moment. He sat patiently by her bed, waiting for her to recover, hoping for her to recover, praying for her to recover. "Shiva," a barely audible whisper broke the silence. Shiva looked at Sati's face. Her eyes were slightly open. Her hand had moved indiscernibly. He pulled his chair closer, careful not to touch her. "I'm so sorry," cried Shiva. "I should never have got us into this fight." "No, no," murmured Sati. "You did the right thing. Someone had to make our stand. You have come to Meluha to lead us and to destroy evil. You did your duty." Shiva continued to stare at Sati, overcome by grief. Sati widened her eyes a bit. She was trying to take in as much of Shiva as she could in what she knew were her last moments. Death is the ultimate destroyer of a soul's aspirations. Ironically, it is usually the approach of this very destruction that gives a soul the courage to challenge every constraint and express itself. Express even a long-denied dream. "It is my time to go, Shiva," whispered Sati. "But before I go, I want to tell you that the last few months have been the happiest in my life." Shiva continued to look at Sati with moist eyes. His hands developed a life of their own and moved towards Sati. He checked himself in time. "I wish you had come into my life earlier," said Sati, letting out a secret that she hadn't acknowledged to herself. "My life would have been so different." Shiva's eyes tried frantically to restrain themselves, struggling against the despair that needed an outlet. "I wish I had told you earlier," murmured Sati, "because the first time that I am telling you will also probably be the last." Shiva looked on at her, his voice choked. Sati looked deeply into Shiva's eyes, whispering softly, "I love you." The dam broke, and the tears poured down Shiva's grief-stricken face. "You are going to repeat these words for at least another 100 years, sobbed Shiva. "You're not going anywhere. I will fight the god of death himself if I have to. You're not going anywhere." Sati smiled sadly and put her hand in Shiva's. Her hand was burning. The fever had begun its assault. Chapter 18. Sati and the Fire Arrow. "Nothing can be done, my lord," said a visibly uncomfortable Ayurvati. She and Shiva were standing in a corner of the hut, at what they thought was a safe distance beyond the range of Sati's ears. Parvateshwar was standing beside them, holding his tears back. "Come on, Ayurvati," urged Shiva. "You are the best doctor in the land. All we have to do is break the fever." "This fever cannot be broken," reasoned Ayurvati. "There is no cure for the Agniban poison. We are only lengthening Sati's agony by keeping the fever low. The moment the medicines are stopped, the fever will recur with a vengeance." "Let it go, Shiva," mumbled a frail voice from the bed. Everyone turned to stare at Sati. Her face bore a smile that comes only with the acceptance of the inevitable. I have no regrets. I have told you what I needed to. I am content. My time has come." "Don't give up on me, Sati," cried Shiva. "You are not gone yet. We will find a way. I will find a way. Just bear with me." Sati gave up. She didn't have the strength. She also knew that Shiva had to find his own peace with her death. And he wouldn't find that unless he had tried everything possible to save her. "I can feel my fever rising," said Sati. "Please, give me the medicines." Ayurvati glanced at Sati uncomfortably. All her medical training told her that she shouldn't do this. She knew that she was just increasing Sati's suffering by giving her medicines. Sati stared hard at Ayurvati. She couldn't give up now, not when Shiva had asked her to hang on. "Give me the medicines, Ayurvati-ji," repeated Sati. "I know what I am doing." Ayurvati gave Sati the medicines. She gazed into Sati's eyes, expecting to find some traces of fear or anguish. There were none. Ayurvati smiled gently and walked back to Shiva and Parvateshwar. "I know," exclaimed Shiva. "Why don't we give her the somras?" "What effect will that have, my lord?" asked a surprised Ayurvati. "The somras only works on the oxidants and increases a person's lifespan. It doesn't work on injuries." "Look, Ayurvati, I don't think anyone truly understands everything about the somras. I know you know that. What you don't know is that the somras repaired a frostbitten toe that I had lived with all my life. It also repaired my dislocated shoulder." "What?" said a visibly surprised Parvateshwar. "That's impossible. The somras does not cure physical disabilities." "It did in my case." "But that could also be because you are special, my lord," said Ayurvati. "You are the Neelkanth." "I didn't drop from the sky, Ayurvati. My body is as human as Sati's, as human as yours. Let's just try it." Parvateshwar did not need any more convincing. He dashed out to find Vraka sitting on a stool. Vraka immediately rose and saluted his commander. "Vraka," said Parvateshwar, "the temple could still have some somras powder. It was the main production center of the area. I want that powder. Now!" "You will have it in 10 minutes, my lord," boomed Vraka as he rushed off with his guards. "There is nothing else to do but wait," said Ayurvati, as Sati fell asleep. The somras had been administered, a stronger dose than usual. "Parvateshwar, you are tired. You need to recover from your wounds. Please go and sleep." "I don't need sleep," said Parvateshwar stubbornly. "I am staying on guard with my soldiers at the perimeter. You can't trust those Chandravanshis. They may launch a counterattack at night." A frustrated Ayurvati glared at Parvateshwar. Her belief reinforced that the machismo of the Kshatriyas made them impossible patients. "Are you going to bed, my lord?" asked Ayurvati, turning towards Shiva, hoping that at least he would listen. "There is nothing you can do now. We just have to wait, and you need the rest." Shiva just shook his head. Wild horses could not drag him away from Sati. "We could arrange a bed in this hut," continued Ayurvati. "You could sleep here if you wish, so that you can keep an eye on Sati." "Thank you, but I'm not going to sleep," said Shiva, briefly looking at Ayurvati before turning towards Sati. "I am staying here. You go to sleep. I will call you if there's any change." Ayurvati glared at Shiva and then whispered, "As you wish, my lord." A tired Ayurvati walked towards her own hut. She needed to get some rest, since the next day would be busy. She would have to check the wounds of all the injured to ensure that the recovery was proceeding properly. The first 24 hours were crucial. Her medical corps had been broken into groups to keep a staggered all-night vigil for any emergencies. "I will be with the soldiers, Shiva," said Parvateshwar. "Nandi and Veerbhadra are on duty outside, along with some of my personal guards." Shiva knew what Parvateshwar actually wanted to say. "I will call you as soon as there is a change, Parvateshwar," said Shiva, looking up at the general. Parvateshwar smiled weakly and nodded to Shiva. He rushed out before his feelings could cause him any embarrassment. Parvateshwar sat silently, his soldiers at a respectful distance. They could tell when their lord wanted to be left alone. Parvateshwar was lost in thoughts of Sati. Why should a person like her be put through so much suffering by the Almighty? He remembered her childhood, the day when he decided that here was a girl he would be proud to have as his goddaughter. That fateful day, when for the first and only time he regretted his vow to not have any progeny of his own. Which foolish father would not want a child like Sati? It was a lazy afternoon more than 100 years ago. Sati had just returned from the Gurukul at the tender age of 16. Full of verve and a passionate belief in Lord Ram's teachings. Lord Brahmanayak still reigned over the land of Meluha. His son, Prince Daksha, was content being a family man, spending his days with his wife and daughter. He showed absolutely no inclination to master the warrior ways of the Kshatriya. Neither did he show the slightest ambition to succeed his father. On that day, Daksha had settled down for a family picnic on the banks of the river Saraswati, a short distance from Devagiri. Parvateshwar remembered well his duties as the bodyguard to Daksha then. He sat near the prince, close enough to protect him, but far enough to give some privacy to the prince and his wife. Sati had wandered off into the forest, further in the distance, close to the river, so that she was visible. Suddenly Sati's cry ripped through the silence. Daksha, Veerani